Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Fake Accents Unite. I apologise, but the King of the Boomers is yet to arrive, but he assures me that he's only going to be a few minutes. I'm joined, of course, by regular co-host, the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Yes, I apologise on behalf of my protege. He's frightfully shy when it comes to these sorts of events.
We've been doing this for... Sargon is your protege. I understand what you're saying now. I thought you were calling me the protege, and I'm like, we've been doing this for 2 years.
No, you're much lowlier than a protege.
I've been doing this with you for 2 years. You've been my protege, effectively. That's what I'm getting at. Anyway, I'm also joined, as you may hear, by the academic agent. Good evening,
sir. You're right, Mark. How are you? I mean, I can't believe I have sullied myself by appearing on the C Show.
You love it. You love it.
It's more than likely bad judgment based on sleep deprivation.
Well, I actually thought this might be a good time to announce that taking a bit of a break from Unpopular Opinions, aren't you, Britisher, for the entire month of June?
We decided I would have a bit of time off and let the hamsters calm down a little.
So you'll be ready for your big return in July. July the 6th will be the Britisher's
the British
shows.
The British is what?
Cut out there that moment.
It's well timed cut out there. Good evening. All right, Sargon, how are you doing, man?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, chaps?
Very good, very good. We've just started, so
that was good timing, wasn't it?
Yeah, we've just about. We decided after 10 minutes we best get it going before people got too bad.
He says we decided. He did a lot of swearing about you being late again, and then decided to go online.
Would I do that? I didn't do that nonsense.
My apologies.
That's fine.
Anyway, just to finish this thought, what I've decided is for the month of June, I have a new, yet to be revealed co-host who will act as a kind of Tudor Pole character, Britisher's Richard O'Brien, for the whole month of June. But anyway, you can tune in for that tomorrow night. What's on the menu, Mark, for tonight?
So obviously this episode is called the George Floyd edition, so unfortunately we can't get away really from discussing the entire issue of the Minneapolis and beyond riots. I think there was something like over 250 protests going on across the US and the rest of the world. But I want to start us off a little further afield, in the same vein, but a little further afield, which is Sony, as in the television camera company, the guys who brought us PlayStation, have completely cucked to the Black Lives Matter narrative. So I'm going to pop up for people on chat to see. Those of you who are you in the stream, you can click Stream Chat above the streaming channel in the Discord, and you can see the first image that I've put in there today, which is the image from Black Lives Matter. It reads, "Being silent about the violence and racism black people experience is being complicit." That's the first thing. "We stand in solidarity today and every day with the black community. Actions always speak louder than words. We're working hard to make sure we at Sony are doing more than just stating we are allies. Right now, we want to use our platform to spread information and support. Please comment below with links, resources, and other helpful information. When we all know more, we can do more. # Black Lives Matter."
So, these riots are getting corporate backing now.
Effectively.
What is that buzzing sound?
What is that buzzing? You guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yep.
Is it my microphone?
Yeah, it's you, yeah.
It seems like you, but I don't know if you've seen, but Star Wars also put out the same message, as did Netflix, as did...
So Hollywood is getting behind Black Lives Matter here, is what we're saying.
Amazon put on out the same message. Well, I mean, all of the big corporations essentially have come out for this. And let me just start. Say something controversial, Mark.
Would you ever say anything controversial? Really? Go on. Go ahead. Go on.
You don't think that we should be making a secular saint out of a scumbag?
Who?
George Floyd himself.
I mean, this is a measure of how far we have fallen. This person who was essentially a career criminal, let's face it, that's what he was, who was resisting arrest, is now being turned into, the second incarnation of Martin Luther King. I mean, this is absolute nonsense, and I don't think we should be indulging in that part of the narrative either. Especially since they did the autopsy and they showed that the cause of death was not the police brutality. So
wasn't and the thing with this is you've kind of preempted something that I wanted to say here, and something which chat is highlighting is both the police officer Chauvin, I think his name is, and and George knew each other from this previous job, but it turns out people are telling me, and rumor has it, that they both did porn, and that this is where some kind of animosity may also have arisen.
Okay, I wasn't expecting this. Go on.
No.
Yeah, sure, but like, humor comes from absurdity. Okay,
yes.
I didn't think that they'd be all porn enemies.
So it's the police officer apparently did gay porn, and
right.
George Floyd did straight porn. And
so
that
how did they ever come in contact?
Well, apparently they worked a job together as bouncers outside a strip club or something.
So is this like football rivalry, like Everton versus Arsenal, or Manchester versus Liverpool with straight and gay porn?
So
what are we saying here?
Yeah, they worked at the same club basically. Yeah. Regardless of this,
okay.
What I know is that So I don't know the ins and outs of it, and from what I can tell, a lot of this stuff around the porn stuff is conjecture. Although it's clear that
right.
George Floyd was involved in it in some way. It's about they're trying to tie Chauvin to it on the other side now. So So I'll point out that is relative conjecture. But like, there's so much stuff in the background which is muddling the relationship between these two men, that there's no guarantee at all that even if he murdered him, that it was racially motivated, right? In the first place, that it's all in. It's out of focus, I would say. And we've also got this thing where what is it like? It's pulled out from both the corporate media and the kind of all the woke leftists on Twitter and Facebook and all the students and everything about how there's this kind of systemic discrimination against blacks in America, and how there is an epidemic of violence where young black men are being gunned down in the street. Do you know how many young black, do you know how many unarmed black men were killed by police last year?
No.
8. So whilst that it's disproportional, still it's not 6 times as many for the white population. I think it was 19 unarmed white people were killed last year, out of the odd 900 to 1,000 murders a year, or killings a year, I should say, that the police in America do. It's like, this is not some astronomical figure. This is not like someone being shot every week. This is not as I've been listening to a lot of Thomas Sowell actually on this issue, because he's talked a lot about how the black culture has changed over time, and he points out that this kind of behaviour is nothing compared to, say, like the way that the Malaysians, the Malay, treated the Chinese who were over there. Now, I know it's not a question of, like, oh, these people were worse and that sort of thing, but it's the rhetoric around it. So the Chinese there, the Malays killed more Chinese people in one night than were lynched in the whole history of the US. Right? That's how much they hated them. That was the kind of racist rhetoric. You could say that there was like such a systemic and general racial bias and genocidal intent from the native people to the settlers that that it was undeniable. Whereas this is like, we've got 8 people. That's the main thing.
I saw a stat going around actually, Mark, which is that for every 10,000 black people arrested, violent crime, 3 are killed. For
So-
every 10,000, so for
You
every
cut out
10,000, I don't know why I cut out on this. I don't know why I'm cutting out, but so for every 10,000 black people arrested for violent crime, 3 are killed. Every 10,000 white people arrested for a violent crime, 4 are killed. Actually, more people. If you adjust
Yes.
for actual arrests, more white people are killed by the police than people.
Yes, this was also corroborated in a post made by where's this? The New York Post basically said this. New York Post. The lies told by the Black Lives Matter movement, and it talks about all the percentages basically. As in New York City, where blacks make up 23% of the population, they commit 3/4 of all shootings, 70% of all robberies. Whites commit 2% and 4% of all robberies, respectively. And then when it comes to the murder suspect, when it comes to the police shooting rate, the whites are overrepresented, like massively overrepresented, based on this thing. And the big thing that I'm noting is missing from all of the narrative, even if it gets kind of glanced at, is the the black crime rate in general is completely ignored. Where I've got this this story here. But yes, sorry, I've got a lot of stuff. Yeah, why racism is worse in the US than in Europe. It's a BBC article, and it basically says, black people might receive different treatment from law enforcement. In the American discourse, sorry, I'm missing the right article. Yeah, what does the data show about race and policing? So it's like African Americans are more likely to get fatally shot, and they point out that the number of people killed in police shootings, percentage of fatal police shootings compared to percentage of population by ethnicity, is that blacks are shot 23.4% of the time, despite only being 13.4% of the population. But that doesn't account for the fact that, in terms of violent crime, they commit much more than that. That's just not a statistic which is alluded to in the BBC article.
Yeah.
They point out, drug abuse is massively overrepresented in the African American community. So
what has shocked me more than anything else. Can you guys hear me better now, by the way? Because
you sound alright.
Yep.
I've gone onto the app rather than trying to do it through my browser. I'm not used to using this Discord nonsense, to be honest. But anyway, the thing that surprised me most is the sheer unwillingness of anyone in the American public life or in politics to touch on this. It's like all sides, including the Republicans, have abdicated their responsibility to point out the fact that actually black people are responsible for their own actions.
Well, hang on a second.
And that they do, they do more crime.
Hang on. It's totally believable that they would do this. We do the same with the grooming gangs. We do exactly the same. You just can't make that kind of condemnation, right? Because what you're saying is there's an ethical failing in this entire community, and that's too bitter a pill for them to swallow.
The thing is, just so that I'm clear that I'm not entirely on the against the black community on this. If you do actually look at the police cases, they do appear to have a huge issue with actually disciplining their officers. For instance, Chauvin, I think this was his 18th offence. Not all of them are race-related.
Klobuchar got him off as well for something else. Didn't he?
Exactly. It's like they have a huge issue. Like, it's the same as the military when I was in.
Why would they be forced to do that though? That's the thing, right? Like, why would they want to do that? Like, this is it. There's never going to be a solution to the problems of this community, and they're just getting worse. What's the point in punishing a cop who's sick of it? That's going. I'm not saying I'm in favor of that, obviously. But I think that's the mindset that's bred by the situation that you're faced with, right? I think honestly, I'm getting quite black-pilled on all of this, and I'm thinking that a lot of these people are actually like really sort of blunt realists, and just like they're never going to change. It's just going to get worse. Fuck it. Fuck it,
Well,
I'm not going to waste this guy's time. I'm not saying it's right, obviously, but I think that kind of attitude is the sort of thing that might be present.
Well, one of the things that people might be interested to look at is policing methods in Africa, and how in places like Nigeria, for example, they might have dealt with riots like this, because in those countries the police would just open fire.
Yeah,
And
they
that's
would.
that's not white on black. That's how, and it's because, how can I put this? With that particular community, you may need different methods. It's not like living around here where the government tells you to keep within 2 meters of everybody else and everybody just does it and obeys the law. It's not like that. It's a different community and it requires a different, a firmer hand, you might say, a firmer hand.
Well, actually, I put out a link on Twitter earlier, because there was some footage, I think it was BBC, I'm not sure, of Black Lives Matter protesting in London.
Yep.
And that one really rubbed me up the wrong way. I think people must have noticed in the tone of my tweet, because, if you want to protest against violence against black people here in Britain, in another country, would the United States of America really be the first nation that would spring to mind? And I put a link in that tweet that actually linked to a BBC article of all things, of torture in Nigeria by security forces. And I mean, if you ever watch the BBC footage, it makes your eyes water. But yes, it just kind of shows how everything is sort of America-centric. And, that you would actually go to a demonstration in London, pushing your fist into the air and chanting Black Lives Matter, and yet you don't care what is happening in Nigeria, in Uganda, you don't give a damn about that.
No. And the whole kind of intra-racial violence that nobody cares about either, even if you're only going to look at, say, the African American community, it's like they're disproportionately killing each other.
Oh yes,
I think
the numbers there are quite staggering.
Well, for every 100 deaths in the US, 0.77 of them are white on black crime, and something like 53 are black on black. It's horrendous.
I mean, I don't know where you guys are on this, but I feel so strongly about this issue. But that if I know anybody who actually supports these riots, who went to those protests, for example, I would defriend them. I just want to cut them out. I do not want to be associated with anybody who has supported some of the scenes I've seen in the past week, because they've been horrific. Some of the things I've seen have been horrific this week.
Yeah, but not to mention, right, aside from anything else, the tacit demands attached onto these protests by the by say Black Lives Matter, which include things like abolishing ICE, abolish the police, segregate our community further. It's an untenable solution. And people also kind of engaging in a lot of, I guess you might call it, something must be doneism.
Yeah.
So, Peter Hitchens is quite fond of using that one, where it's like, well, at least they're doing something. What else are they supposed to do? None of that,
I mean, with respect, each of these places have been Democrat run. In many cases, they've had a long history, not just of a black mayor, but of black chiefs of police in many of these exact communities that we're looking at. The Minnesota mayor stood there like a 10th-rate cuckolded Justin Trudeau, saying, "Oh, I sympathise with you all. I encourage you to protest." Bending over backwards and appeasing these people has led to this. So how can you?
That statement you just made completely invalidates their protest anyway, because they're pushing on an open door. Right? It is directly within his power, presumably, to influence the police within his districts.
You would think the mayor would have some influence there.
You know, I mean, given the amount that Sadiq Khan has managed to do in London with our police, you know,
God, yeah.
it's his responsibility, surely.
Well, it's easy. He can appoint whatever commissioner he wants, can't he?
Exactly.
You know, like we get Cressida Dick. You know, I mean, Khan probably didn't appoint her, but he certainly would have done it if he had the option.
Yes.
So the point I wanted to make is, what is the next level of appeasement beyond this? The only thing I can think of is that you no longer police black areas. You just leave them. Wait. You just leave them to be areas of crime and lawlessness. Oh wait, that happened already, didn't it, with the police there? So why not just pull the police out, leave them to it? Then there won't be any police brutality at all, will there?
Well, okay, so one of the things that I was thinking during your recitation of the statistics, Mark, was that the one thing we can't do is sit here and say there's not a problem, right?
No.
And normally when people give out statistics, say, well, actually, and tip the fedora, that's usually a precursor to saying you don't really have a problem. Problems are what you perceive to be problems,
it's
right? And so I know. I'm not trying to paint anyone. I'm just trying to say that, like, it's very easy to fall into that mindset, and I don't want to do that, because it's difficult in talking to Americans to speak candidly about it, but it is a definite failure on both sides, right? The Republicans have failed to provide like a viable alternative. Like, I can't believe anyone would vote for the Democrats. It seems disgraceful to me that the Republicans don't just have a timeline of, you know, the Democrat-run areas with the people in charge of it, and then the decline, and saying, this is what you're voting for. Just that's the campaign. You know, this is what you're voting for. Vote Republican. We'll do a better job.
The only counter to that I can think of is that people are claiming that there were Obama Democrats who didn't want to vote for Hillary after the whole Bernie situation in 2016, who kind of protest voted for Trump, and those are the people who are going to be completely put off by both his crushing Antifa protest, although we'll get onto that.
I don't mean about Trump. I mean about the Republican ethic, right? The ethos, the thing that drives them, right? They can very easily point out, look, whatever it is they've been doing to you, it's been wrong. You know, I'm not surprised considering they're the party of this, that, and the other, right? The Republicans could approach this in a much better way and actually start presenting a viable alternative, but they've done a poor job of it from what I can see. You know, the Democrats can still somehow claim the Republicans are the party of racism, even though, I mean, it's not good to just give people things. You know, there has to be an effective way of communicating this in a way that they'll understand. I'm not saying that I'm well enough versed with the African American community to be able to explain it, you know, in terms they'll understand, but someone can surely come along and, you know, say, well, look, if I just gave you this, you know, award for being the #1 rapper of all time, but you'd never made a thing, blah blah blah. You know, however you translate the language across, but like there has to be an understanding and an accounting of the. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Well, again, I think what you're trying to summarize is also something which Soul was saying.
No, hang on, no. So yeah, basically, there has to be a way of getting it through to the people of the black community that they just have to have some kind of personal responsibility.
The incentives.
It's not all. Like that guy T did a video about this a few years ago, and it went viral because it was completely true. Because he was just like, look, you know, you can say all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, you're the ones doing the stupid stuff. You can't just blame all of your problems on white people, right? And it's the Democrats who have encouraged them to do that, and encouraging them to do that is what is driving them into this hole. So now, in a land where they've actually got, you know, remarkably low being shot by cops statistics, they think that the cops are literally about to gun them down every 5 seconds. You know, it's the Democrats' atmosphere and ideology that's like pushed this in. It's keeping them like dependent. It's unhealthy. It's awful watching this thing collapse. You know, because it didn't have to, probably. You know, I mean, it's not that bad everywhere else.
They're massively radicalizing, especially the young people. From what I can tell, like 14 and 15-year-olds, those are the people who, interestingly, Antifa are targeting on the streets and handing bricks to, literally.
I fucking bet. I bet it's easy to get them up and thing. But I saw this video earlier of this cop talking to this young black man. He just has his hand on the shoulder, and this young black
Yeah.
kid just starts crying. I can't remember. I couldn't hear what he was saying or something, but like you could tell just by the way the conversation was going that this kid has never had a father sit down and give him like a man-to-man talk about any subject. And like, honestly, that has to be the first thing. Why are they not marrying? That has to be the question. You have to marry, or your children will be fucked up. And if your children are fucked up, you raise a generation of fucked up people who can't raise their own kids. And
Yeah.
and you go spiraling down into now you've got gang warfare in Chicago. It's like 6 people a night being shot, and it's like no one cares. And everyone's like, well, it's fucking irresponsible for everyone to just be like, well, that's what they do, isn't it?
It's Sargon. We discussed this when I was on your channel the other night.
Yeah.
Isn't it 78% now? I
It was
read
72 last time I looked. So it was a couple
I
of years ago
mean,
I looked though. So I mean, I'm not saying it hasn't gone up.
the rate of children born out of wedlock is 78%. Of
Staggering.
those who are in one-parent families, I don't know, but it was 50-odd% in 1995, and I think that's increased since then. So, it really, all of that is true, but part of me does think, and again, I'm going to be controversial.
Mhm.
All of these things were pointed out by Sowell, who we keep on mentioning,
Yeah.
in 1975. Okay, that's when he wrote his
Mhm.
first book on economics and race. And Detroit, this had happened in Detroit. Okay, exactly what we've seen happened in Detroit in 1967, and Detroit, as you know, went down the shitter. In fact, they've done this in city after city, and now it's happened again nationwide. I mean, for the black community, it's absolutely tragic. One of the most affecting things I saw was the speech given by the mayor of Atlanta, who was almost in tears.
Yeah.
And the reason that was really upsetting for me was that in all the research I've done, I looked at Liberia, I looked at Ethiopia, I've looked everywhere for examples of black success stories, and the closest thing in the world in history to a black success story is actually Atlanta in Georgia,
Right.
where there
Yeah, they
is
call it the Black Wall Street, don't they?
yeah, because there's a lot of successful middle class black people who live there. There's a lot of business owners there. I mean, I don't exactly know what they did to achieve this, but it's actually the one place that's done well. It never had problems like in the 60s and so on. And now basically they've trashed the place. Do you know what I mean? So it's like any time they even start to build something, it then gets wrecked again, and then you're looking at it and you think this just looks like these could be scenes from any of those countries I just named, and it I mean for them it must be terribly blackpilling, but from our point of view, or from the point of view of people who have to live with this community, you just think, well, how many years is it going to take before the lessons that you were just talking about are either faced up to, or or they start to realize it and start to vote differently. I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. I just don't think it's going to happen.
This is why I'm such a fan of what Kanye West is doing. Married, successful Christian gospel preacher at this point. I know. It's like, good, he needs it. They need it.
Didn't he say at one point, "I am not black, I am Kanye"?
Yes,
that was his thing.
Exactly the right attitude. But okay, they identify themselves as the black community. That's not gonna wash, right? I agree with the extreme. They're not going to change in that regard. But getting them a new ethos, is definitely something they need, because it is really it's annoying that one of I think the major blockages to this, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion among some circles, is black women themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is don't crucify me, but I wouldn't marry what the portrayal of black women is on TV and in the media. Whenever I'm presented with the black woman on a panel or whatever, I just see attitude problem.
You mean the pinnacle of sass?
Yeah, I see someone who is desperately overcompensating for having not much in the way of real virtue, and it's not because they're black. There are black women like who are not like that at all. You know, women from Africa are not like American black women.
They're certainly
hell,
not. I mean, I lived there for a while. They're definitely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, British black women are not like American black women, you know, but the American black women have got this bizarre like thing where they, you know, where they're like, oh, we're goddesses, we're amazing. It's like, well, statistically, not really. You know, you're the people with the lowest earnings. You're the people with, you know, problem children. You're the, you know, you've got all these problems, and yet you seem to not want to accept that you have these problems. And
not only
people
that,
fit in all around, but the thing is, that's fine because normally people don't get to fucking pretend that they don't have problems, you know. But throwing money at the welfare state means that they can just continually exist in a delusional world.
speaking
And
of,
I'm well, and but the thing is, I'm saying like this is an unhealthy thing to do to someone, right? This isn't a criticism of the black woman. This is a criticism of whoever has done this. You know, once you started doing it, and it obviously wasn't going very well. You probably should have been like, right, okay, I might actually be making things worse because I think you are making things worse like that.
yeah,
Hold on a second. I do want to say something though, which is that, I mean, part of you wants to say, okay, the solution then is to leave them alone, let them come to these conclusions themselves. But the realist part of my brain and the evidence that I've looked at makes me think, actually, in the first instance at least, or at least for a couple of generations, what you need is a firm hand. And the example I will give you is that video I made on black flight and white flight, if you remember that one.
I haven't actually seen it yet.
Right, where the pioneers come in and they're basically taught how to behave in the area.
Yeah.
You know, mow your lawn.
Oh yeah,
paint,
yeah, yeah. I
paint
remember
your
you telling me that.
fences.
Yeah.
Take your trash out. And the guy said, you know, Mr. Henry would basically come and tell you off, okay, because he was literally raising me up, okay, and then the subsequent people come in, and the pioneers basically fail to do the same thing with them, partly because they came in with the wrong attitude in the first place. But what I'm saying is that these things don't happen on their own. They need to be kind of inculcated in you. And in fact, what's happening in our society is the reverse is happening. You're actually getting the degenerate behaviors of this community being spread the other way round. So now you've got Mr. Henry's son, you know, joining Antifa or walking around like a rapper or something like this, and it's wrong. You need to enforce. But the point is, social and moral norms don't happen on their own. They need to be enforced. They need to be taught. Somebody needs to lay down the law.
The father.
It's not
That's the father's job.
It's the father's job, but they also, you know, the only way I can think it happening is there needs to be like a cultural revolution, effectively, in their own community, where you know, presumably there's going to be someone who this rise up, you know, a new kind of community leader, who inculcates like this thing that we have this idea about, you know, like, oh, we don't want to act white, like, because that's another thing, like they reject the idea of being white, and that includes all of the cultural standards. And so what it will be is like someone who calls back to say like the 1950s kind of, you know, the working communities where you know, it was safe for blacks, and, you know, again, I'm going to keep mentioning his name, that Thomas Sowell keeps talking about, you know, they used to sleep out on the fire escapes because they couldn't afford air conditioners, and it was safe to do so, and they would sleep in the parks if they wanted to. And there was also this kind of like, effectively, that they need to, it would probably come under the guise, I think, of taking back these standards, as in, you know, like, why would we allow white people to have a monopoly on, you know, like, this kind of living?
Yeah. No, well, the thing is, they have to understand that there's only one method to achieve what you want, and that's through your own virtue, right?
It's difficult.
Yeah, exactly. It's sacrifice. It is personal sacrifice. You know, I mean, like, I would really want to see kids generally taught Aristotle, but I think the black community could really use it. and teach them some stoicism and things like this as they're growing up, just in the curriculum. Just just put the ideas in. Say, look, this is just the method by which you get this. It's very easy. If you want something, you just work for it. Blah blah blah. You do the right thing. You get better every day, etc., etc., etc. Everything's incremental. It's by habit.
Well, you were saying you wanted to
that
write.
would be what I think they need to be taught, because that's what your father teaches you. That's what your father should teach.
Well, you said you said you wanted to write a book now, Sargon.
Yeah, I guess. Dear Black community,
and it can be called Black.
Read Aristotle.
You can call it Blackaristotle. And
yeah, Blackaristotle. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
But like seriously, I think that would just be nothing but a benefit. But the thing is, you wouldn't get immediate results. It'd be long term.
Yeah, it's going to take a generation at least.
Yeah. But until you talk about like black men not fulfilling their role as the man, because they aren't. They're effectively, these sort of like looters and gangs and stuff. Seems like just teen behavior to me. It seems like that's what teenagers do. If left alone, Lord of the Flies it up. And the women have to understand that they actually have an obligation to the man, and the neither one seems to like generally, want to fulfill these roles. I'm not saying, there aren't lots of black people who do, American black people who do this, because there are obviously, but like it's clearly an issue.
It's about like how can you induce reform, and can we even, or is it just
there has to be a desire for improvement?
Yeah, you can't force that desire. Like, again, people have to go through things by themselves. Like the Christian community talk about, like you can't make a Christian. Right, you can't force anyone to be a Christian. It's like no one comes to the Lord but through Himself. Right, as in you seek and you will find. And similarly, like even the best teacher in the world can't make someone who wants to be a Marxist not a Marxist. Right, again, like Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell was a Marxist when he left his university. So there has to be that desire there, and it's more about like how can you cultivate that desire. And you can't seem to do it because, obviously, as AA will attest, like Sowell, Friedman, all the those kind of economists and stuff tried to do it by just presenting facts and saying, "Look, it's just clear that evidence doesn't add up." And people obviously aren't pure rational beings, and
communism isn't an economic theory; it's a moral theory.
Yes, it's a philosophy.
Yes.
So,
the thing I would look to is basically sort of the tragedy of leadership. The sort of absolute lack of moral authority of anybody who would kind of assume a leadership position. When you look at sort of black politics, it's largely just doing nothing else but reinforcing a victimhood narrative. When you look at anything that is sort of involves black academia, African studies, black studies, black history studies, they're all completely toxic. They're designed to do nothing else but reinforce grievances.
So what you're saying,
disempower the individual as well. It's about disempowerment. It's about telling them they can't succeed.
At this point, even the educated amongst the black community, you're saying, are being taught a particular worldview which doesn't do them any good.
Yes, but what I mean is those would be the people they would be asked to look up to.
Yeah.
Those are the people within their own ranks who are supposed to have made it, who are supposed to have done well. And they are doing nothing else but telling the people behind them, as in, oh, don't even try climbing up the ladder to where I am because you won't be allowed because the system is against you.
Okay, can I ask something though? Because these are all things we've known. These are all things that I would have said in a video back in 2017 or something. We know this stuff, okay? All of this stuff we've talked about has been known for decades. At what point do you just cut the cord and say, actually, look, it's not our problem anymore? Why should it be our problem? We've got problems of our own. For example, why am I watching videos today of a group of white people kneeling and praying to a group of black people, like a bunch of cuckolds? It is
our problem.
Because that's the same problem.
Yeah, it's part of the same problem.
No, that is a problem too. Now, my question is, at what point do we say that? Listen, really, this problem in itself is too big to turn around. So why don't we just cut loose and, separate?
Because nobody's going to go
from-
for that. Nobody's
Why
gonna go
not?
for that.
Why not?
We
Because
live in
they will
multiracial
say that's racist.
No,
and
no,
it would be.
cut off not only from this community that we've been talking about, but also from the sort of people who would support the riots, or the sort of people who you saw kneeling down there. These aren't people I want as my fellow citizens.
So you're saying that if someone has a bad take on something because they haven't got the time to read anything but mainstream media news sources, and they read the BBC, which says Trump has declared Antifa a terrorist organisation. Antifa is a group against white supremacy, and they go, "That sounds insane. Trump must be a bad person," etc. If they have a bad take like that because they haven't done the thing, then they should be ejected from society.
We've had not eject. I didn't say ejected from society. I said a separation. A separation.
Okay, so what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, like I said before, a two-state solution. We should do the same thing in this country as well.
No one is going to do that. No.
Why not?
It sounds an awful lot like apartheid.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not apartheid, because the white liberals would be forced to live in those areas as well, because in the
You'll be forced into the second state. It's not a choice thing.
Or rather, I mean, when we discuss my plan A and plan B, I'll go through this. Or rather, you would set the immigration rules as such where they were not allowed entry into the new based and red-pilled country that you create.
Who gets the nice counties and who gets the shit ones?
Well, you just do it by party control.
If I can just get back to the that point of authority within a community. I mean, a lot has been said about, what would Martin Luther King make of this whole thing? I don't think he would be amused at all by the state of black society today.
Yeah.
There is one example that I recall, and I know this is not somebody who is universally popular or whatever, but nonetheless, it was one of those moments where I sort of really think he kind of proved his mettle. And that was that old goat, Yasser Arafat. When the 9/11 incident, when the aircraft was smashing into the skyscrapers and the whole thing was on fire, people in Palestine came out and danced in the street. And he came on television and he was furious. And you could see this wasn't an act. He was disgusted. And he said, people are dying. Thousands and thousands of people are dying, and you have nothing better to do than to dance and to jump up and down and think this is a good thing. People are seeing you doing this. You look like a bunch of animals. And it was that ability to tell his own people what they would not want to hear, and nonetheless have the, how do we say, the moral authority, the moral weight in order to be able to do this and to be heard. And within an hour, the streets of Palestine were clear. And this is what I mean. If you would have a Martin Luther King figure, if you would have somebody who would have that sort of authority, who would have that respect, some kind of Gandhi, where they would look up to him. And if he came out and said, this is disgusting, get off the streets, you're dragging people from cars and beating them to death, how dare you? Then they would go. But the thing is, the abject sort of failure of the leadership on that side. I mean, a lot of stuff is said about Obama, but I think that is more than likely where history is going to be sort of most hard on him. The fact that he was the great rhetorician, the fact that he was the first black president, the fact that a lot of people thought that if anybody could make any inroads into healing this rift, he would be the sort of person who would be able to do it. But it never happened. If anything, one played further into these grievances. And that's where, to me, the sort of abject failure lies. Because to me, it is with inspiration that this could be overcome. But it requires the personnel to be able to do this. And they are just not there. Because to me, the idea, if you think yourself some individual, a single black man somewhere in some black ghetto, telling him about black crime statistics, telling him about single motherhood statistics, all these things are true, but they don't help him to get anywhere.
Hmm.
And he will nonetheless remain completely trapped within that place. And that's the sort of tragedy of this. There needs to be someone to inspire them to actually turn things around. Because I can't see it happening otherwise.
Wow.
Have I just silenced everything? So,
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
British,
I listen to the likes of Al Sharpton and whatever, and I just despair. They're doing nothing else but stoking the fire.
One other terrible thing as well, which I will mention. The Atlanta example is an extreme case, but it stands for a lot of these areas. Is that unfortunately, even when you get the green shoots of recovery, or you get kind of nice things happening, something comes along and wrecks it again, like these riots that have happened. Or and this has been the story over and over, and it just, I mean, I don't know. I just wonder if you just say this has been a terrible mistake. The whole country.
But one of the things that I just keep coming back to the mindset, right? I keep thinking, right, okay, what would I be thinking if I was in that mindset that I'm black and I'm being oppressed because I live in a country that's systemically racist and has always tried to hold the black man down, right? I would think, fuck, white people, whether I would think this or not, I would be assuming that white people spend a lot of time thinking about me, right? And the reality, I think, is that they don't spend any time thinking about them.
No, it doesn't come into the daily thought.
Exactly. They're not like, and I think this is what the black community has to understand, right? It's not that white people are malicious towards black people, like they want to hurt them or anything like that. It's they just don't think of them in that term. They just don't think about it.
The British and American tradition is the closest to a post-racial society that has kind of existed so far, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's an action-oriented society, right? It's procedural. It's very ritualistic. It's how did we get from A to B to C? The line of progress matters, and the means justify the ends. And so essentially, like, the white people can't do anything from their point of view because their perspective is, well, you get what you deserve. You didn't do the work. You are reaping the terrible reward of that. And so the black people have to understand it's not a dichotomy. Like, the white people do not see themselves as dichotomized against the black people in the same way that the black people see themselves as dichotomized against the white people. That they're just not a factor in the daily decision making, unless you're a Democrat, progressive, blah blah blah, or an alt-right guy.
In fact, we are criticized for this. Like, in my own discipline of psychology, it's something which comes up where it's like they allow. So they'll ask the black people, how cognizant of you are of your race, and usually someone's like, I think about it every single day. I think about it when I'm going down the street. I'm always feeling under threat. I always feel like I need to kind of watch out. It's like a cornered animal is the kind of mindset I would think about it as. And then the whites in the room, and they are addressed as the whites in the room, are told, you need to be aware of this. Yeah.
But it is actually the reverse. I think black people need to become aware that white people are not thinking about them. Yeah. But you are right, Britisher, that it's the moral leaders of the black community have got them thinking this way. They're the ones who set the tone of intellectual discourse. It can't be anyone else. You hear it from black people in America. Like, Neeraj will say stuff like this. Like, it's the ones who aren't trapped in this mindset, who realize that they're not, like, under the thumb. They're not actually. There's not a conspiracy against them. Nobody gives a shit. That's the thing, and maybe that's scarier. Who knows? I think I've not been in that position.
I think that's why when Kanye West started making his various statements, it caused such a stir because he was effectively the first black person of any great celebrity to actually, refer to the fact, the issue of a lot of this being a mindset.
But I mean, with respect, everyone, we spend a long time talking about this from the point of view of the black community. But we also have to think about things from the point of view of what is going to happen to white people in this system, where Mark is sitting in the classroom now, being encouraged to think about how he appears, and when we've seen footage of people literally kneeling
Yeah,
in some strange kind of submissive fashion in front of black people, because it's not going in the way that Britisher or you, Sargon, or me would like, and it hasn't gone in that way. It's going in the opposite direction,
yes.
whereby white people are being subjugated and forced to become second-class citizens in their own countries. What these riots have shown is that white people in America can expect the law not to be on their side when black people riot, and that cannot be sustainable in the long run. It just can't be sustainable. And I think the much bigger issue for us to think about is, well, what do we do now? Because that community, it's going to have its problems, but we've got bigger problems. Because guess what? As much as my heart goes out to that community, if the police stop protecting my property rights, that is a much bigger concern for me, and it should be for all of you too.
Well,
Because
this is hang on. This is clearly the consequence of excessive pandering, right? The reason that these riots are happening is because they know they're not just going to get the truncheon.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go riot like that because I know I'll get the truncheon, right? And this is the problem. So for the past, 50 years, however it's been, like the pandering has increased and increased. And then we've got to the point where the progressives have turned the pandering into a form of virtue itself, which is why you see the white people on bended knee going, I am the one virtuous white person, or we are the one virtuous,
I've seen...
but the thing is, it literally has to be that we say, look, we've been pandering, it hasn't been good for you, we have to stop, sorry, you're going to have to do the same thing that we do to get the same result as we get.
I've seen an analogy which was basically that if we see a child throwing a tantrum in a classroom, we take the child away, and it's a sign of trauma. So why then, when we see black people rioting, do we not see it as a trauma and help them? And so I pointed out, like, there's so many fallacies with this particular. It was a solidarity post, but there's so many fallacies in it. Like, in the first, that it infantilizes the whole black community. It shows that not only because obviously there was the case I just referenced back of what was that woman's name who had the dog, and the black guy said,
I know the one you mean.
and
Karen, right?
Yeah, the Karen, and she basically said, "I will call the police and say that an African American man is threatening me." And that was the language which people took umbrage to. No one really cares if he threatened her or not. It was that language that the idea that she knew that he would be treated differently as a black man. And it's the language from, like, the left progressives who are saying, let's treat them like they're a child who's had trauma and only we can help them. That kind of message, it's like when these riots are all.
The worst aspect
let me finish.
Of
Just let me finish. When these riots are all over and they've burned their city to the ground, who are they going to call on to bail them out? They're going to reinforce their base with the Democrats, because the Democrats are the ones who are going to say, we're going to throw more money at you for your righteous struggle. To rebuild your community, and the Republicans are going to say you made your bed and you lie in it. That's further alienating them.
But you see, my response. I saw that tweet as well, and I responded to it and said, "This is a mass failure to enforce discipline and order. Tessa Horn, who was the person who made this ridiculous tweet, should be arrested and re-educated in a camp until she stops speaking in this way." And I'm not at this point. I'm not joking. How are we gonna sort this problem out unless we start literally re-educating these people by force?
Well, it has to begin with honesty. It has to begin with brutal honesty.
Style, literally tortured until they stop talking this shit.
I don't.
don't
I,
think
d-
about
I,
it.
d-
don't
I-
think
You're taking the
torture-
softly approach
like
again,
I,
aren't you?
I,
AA?
I don't think that there's a way in which that this can be mandated without life itself becoming more difficult, because we've reached a point with kind of I guess quality of life in terms of just financial and economic prosperity, where like life is just so easy that it's easy to assume these positions because there are no consequences, right? The reason that protests have had diminishing returns over time is not just because the elites have stopped listening to people, but also because the impact of a protest means nothing. It's like it's a bunch of people who have taken time out of their day, but really it won't impact them in the long run. They've had to make no sacrifice to go protest. It's a bit of fun. It's a holiday. It's a day out. We saw it with the EU protests, regarding Brexit and that sort of thing. And then you've also got, there's no harm to the economy. If these people are like, we're going to protest for 2 weeks and this is going to completely annihilate an entire industry, the government's going to pay attention to that because it's their economy as much as it is, the regular persons, that people must care about this a lot. But in the current thing, where we're primarily a service industry, for instance, and in America, I know it's not quite the same, but, the protest doesn't have the same impact that it does. So we know that this protest is going to have basically zero impact on things. And it's unclear how you can get things through to anyone without life just universally becoming more difficult. But I don't think that we should, go back to the days before washing machines in order to bring more suffering into people's lives. I don't know how it can be achieved.
Well, I think the first thing they need to do is stop the actual riots.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
I would advocate, as in, the first thing you need to do is restore order, and one feels that some people are almost reluctant to use force, and you feel, well, there is no other way. In the end, you have to show that the actual elected authorities are the ones who have the greatest force. And if that means cracking a few skulls in the end, then that's what it will take.
I think if Trump manages to pull in the National Guard properly, and the National Guard come in and basically diffuse the protests through escalation, which is presumably what you're saying there, is if he makes it a big statement and the National Guard make a big statement about the fact that this is harming so many black businesses. Like the primary victims of this have been black people of the riots. I think that's the only way to prevent people from reoffending in this. This is so what you did in order to throw a tantrum. I think there's a great meme about this of two peasants, and one of them's like, I'm going to protest the king, and burning another person's livelihood while the king watches on with popcorn. And
yes, I've seen that meme. Yes.
Yeah, and it's just if you don't stop it, if you don't fulfill your role as effectively the ruler, you are the elected ruler of America, in that case, and you need to make those hard decisions which protect people. And if you can basically lay out that the reason that you're doing this is to protect people, from further stuff, rather than just cracking down on protesters, which is the spirit of the mainstream media. I think Trump, yelling about Antifa is a bit unproductive. I support him criminalizing Antifa as a terrorist organization, but I think that his rhetoric around it's Antifa, it's the far left who's doing this, right, is much less helpful than him basically saying we're sending in the National Guard to help these people who are trapped by looters and rioters who are burning buildings. If he retweeted out that shot of that black guy who'd put all his savings into that sports bar, where it was looted whilst he was having that interview, then there could be a real to change the entire atmosphere around the response to it. Then you can get away effectively with more direct action, because it's exactly what the left are doing. They're using moral stances in order to justify that brick through your window.
Should have made a video about it.
Sorry?
I think
You should have made a video about
I
it.
should have made a video about it.
I think there is also a certain convenience to the media that they have got
I'm just
this
going to go get a drink.
approach.
I'll be back in a minute. Sorry.
Yeah, see you in a
They
second,
have got this approach that, oh well, we don't want to show you any upsetting images.
Yeah.
Because that in itself allows them to effectively censor any of the things out, which would, which, let's face it, the likes of us have seen on Twitter, which would make your blood boil.
I mean, the one of that guy being kicked in the head is ridiculous. I mean, I'm sorry.
Oh, the dude who lost his teeth.
I mean, it's just. I mean, these are things that I feel wrong for having seen because essentially you're watching murder on screen there.
It's
I mean,
something
I don't know.
you can't unwatch. Yes.
And now I've and now we've seen it, and you can't unsee it. But the trouble is, this doesn't reach. I mean, I had a look at how the BBC are framing this and the way they put it, and they basically sanitize the whole thing, and they insist on calling them protesters rather than rioters and looters. So this is this should be criminalized in my opinion, because it's getting to the point where it's criminally negligent and it is aiding and abetting terrorists. We can't have our national media doing that.
I mean, it's literally the classical definition of terrorists as well, as in people committing acts of violence for political gain. That's exactly it, for political aims.
It's disgusting, and at this point, they are literally the enemies of the American people, and us, because they're not. The BBC is just funded by us, don't forget, and they're not serving us. They're not telling us the truth about this story, and that has caused people to break lockdown. All of those protesters who were in London should have been arrested for not keeping social distancing rules.
We'll get onto that later. I just, while Sargon's away, I want to read through a few super chats to catch us up, just so that we don't, it's just something to fill the time. I don't want to miss too much conversation. Coney Current Year says, we need an AA version of the 20-year Britisher meme called a 14-year-old AA. Also, Sir Humphrey Tyrrell Wakefield is based AF. What do you make about being called the 14-year-old academic agent? I don't know.
Fine.
Sir Humphrey Wakefield, I believe, is the father-in-law of Dominic Cummings, and the only thing I know about him is that he has a horse called is it called Obama or something like that, and it's because it's half black and half white.
Yeah,
Coney,
I saw it. He looks based as hell, that guy.
Coney Current Year says Trump needs to let the Dems be seen to fail. I mean they're failing anyway. I mean they're failing. They're not even failing upwards. I just feel like every step that they're taking at the moment is a misstep. Makuta Pterodax says, I'm supremely black-pilled in the present moment. This riot has proven Thomas Hobbes right and Rousseau wrong. Long live Augustus Imperator. Thoughts, gentlemen?
If you're still in any way believing of things that Rousseau said, you're in 2020 after the things that you've seen. You should probably check yourself into a mental asylum.
I'm much concerned about the Augustus Imperator thing. I mean, does this mean one is now looking for the sort of single strong man to take over, preferably in a peak cap and a cape?
Tricorn, if it can be arranged. I don't know. British Knight says, it's so blackpilling when you realise the police are starting to boogaloo themselves to justify inciting more boogaloo. Oh yeah, there's that clip that's going around at the moment, isn't there, of that guy saying, we stand with you, and marching with the protesters. I mean,
yeah,
it's in the same vein as flipping, like all the police standing around at Pride with their little rainbow flags on their face. It means nothing, but the police are having a fun time. Pretty much. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says, let's post our blackest pill we're willing to consider might be true. Mine is that the CCP is funding these riots to throw the US into chaos as they invade Taiwan next month. I've not heard anything about Taiwan being invaded. To be
No,
honest.
I mean, I happen to. I don't believe that. I actually happen to think that the Democrats themselves have funded this. It started in Ilhan Omar's district. Don't forget, who's an incredibly dodgy person, as we know, and basically the mayor of Minnesota. I watched the two speeches by him where he basically gave the green light. He basically said, "Yep, I'm
Well,
probably gonna." You know,
he did exactly the same as the mayor of Portland did when Antifa took over that city and was just like, "I'm not going to do anything. They own us now, pretty much." That was the entire message of his speech.
But they are they. What I'm saying is Antifa are agents of these people. They're clearly organized and funded, and the fact that you have celebrities openly donating money to their fund and so on and so forth suggests to me that there's a level of organization to this that is internal to America. I don't believe it was the Chinese or the Russians. I believe it was the network of the establishment left, of which Antifa are the brown shirts, essentially. Yep. And I think they're doing it because all of the other measures have failed. All of the other ways of getting rid of Trump have failed. So they're like, right, it's down to Plan 54. We've tried all the other things. Now let's try the race war. I believe they. Why else are they telling the police to stand down in all these areas? Why are they cheering it on? Why are CNN and MSNBC basically, they're basically cheering it on? Why are celebrities cheering it on when we can see how bad it is? So it must be part of a grand strategy. It must be.
I genuinely think that people are fucking stupid. That's the biggest thing. And celebrity is absolutely no guarantee of intellect, as we well know. And so I think that it's one thing to finance these things, but it's just like it's ignorance. It's like people who don't know what Black Lives Matter stand for, people who don't know how to read like really, really basic statistics that cannot be put into any doubt.
And people who are so invested in opposing the opposite side
Yes.
that they will support anything that they see irritates their opponents. So because they see Republicans railing against Antifa, they then see that as obviously the thing that they wish to support in order to get under the skin of their opponents. I think that there's a lot of that.
Michael VPS says, when riots get looty, Koreans get shooty. That's another thing that we haven't seen, is like people standing on top of the roofs of their businesses and just being like, if you try and loot me, I will shoot you in the street. I don't know whether or not it's because there's just not a stand your ground law in Minneapolis, whether some Americans in the chat can elucidate me there.
I have heard of examples where folks have been outside shops with guns. I don't know what states that will have been in, but I think that obviously those are the places that the looters then seek to avoid. I remember a tweet being shown where somebody kind of said, yeah, the media are showing a lot of close-ups of sort of bearded guys in flak vests, where with some kind of rifle, and the reason they're showing close-ups is because if they actually do a wide-angle shot, you would see that among them are also black people.
Mm-hmm.
So the narrative is, oh, these are white guys with guns, as opposed to, no, these are people with guns trying to protect these shops. And I think in those places in which people will be heavily armed and clearly showing intent to use it, these things won't happen. I mean, wasn't that chap the chap who basically I think he was he protecting his shop with a sword or something like that? I don't know the exact, but
he got beaten down. Yeah,
absolutely hammered. But I believe that was in Dallas. So
yeah, that was in Texas. Yeah,
yeah. So that is in Texas, and clearly they are all right with guns. So it just depends, what the situation is, what the context is. So if you're basically waving a Roman gladius about, which I believe that thing was, then you might not stand as much of a chance as if you've got a few mates and you're all armed to the teeth with rifles.
Yes.
Yeah, big win for the Second Amendment argument, isn't it?
Yes, I think in all fairness, it's fairly indisputable that gun ownership will take a big plus in this one. I can well imagine quite a few people will be queuing for guns right now.
Mm. Dr. Martin Luther Pepe said, Sargon, quit brewing your bloody tea and get your limey ass in here. It's a sentiment that we can all agree on at the moment, can't we? Cody Current Year says, Britisher versus AA versus Mark, Civ 6 stream when? Britisher.
Sorry?
I'm game to do it.
I missed that, sorry.
Britisher versus AA versus Mark, Civ 6 stream when?
Oh dear God, who knows?
We'd be down.
How many hours are you intending to invest into this?
I mean, we could do a whole
They're
Saturday.
very, very long games, and it's also a horrendous game to get into.
I've never played the game before, but I'm sure I'll be better than you, Britisher. So at least there's that.
Well, there you go. Them's fighting words. Yes.
We know, of course, that AA would refuse to engage with any part of the game which involved actually moving pieces with his hand.
I'm an incredibly peaceful simple. I'll just be in the corner building libraries and stuff like that. Probably.
Yes. Ciscoan says, in the time that you were late, light could travel 47,432,832 times around the equator of the planet, still not suiciding Epstein, and Britisher brought up the Romans 3.8 times, and my tea went cold 1.7 times.
I'm impressed at the astronomical angle there, so it's going.
Thank you, Ciscoan. Makuta Pterodax says, I just passed my final assessments for the year. What a treat to enjoy such a star-studded panel. Well, I hope you're enjoying the show, everyone. Thank you very much. Architect of Fate says, 10 minutes, 32 seconds late. The amount of time preference on this stream is staggering. How can I recruit more pickets to the fence with this display? For shame. Ciscoan says, for those unaware, that is 633 seconds late. Thank you. Matchstick, 3 boomers and a minion. Oh, of course. Matthew Hatch says, you'd think Antifa would love Trump now he has designated a fascist organisation terrorist. Right, the Antifa thing, just because I'm not sure how long it's going to take Sargon to get back, is driving
I'm
me...
actually back now.
Oh, welcome back, man.
It's just being polite.
That's all good. Yeah, just on the Antifa thing, because I've got the... people have been saying, Antifa isn't a real organisation, it's a state of mind. And basically trying to get through, I guess, just trying to get through this idea that whether or not they've tweeted out hashtag I am Antifa or not, but also the number of aspersions to, World War II soldiers, I am Antifa and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that, of course, Antifa as an organisation has its own Wikipedia page. And in fact, BBC Radio 4 has its own primer called 7 Things You Need to Know About Antifa.
Well, I'm happy for Antifa to turn around and say, actually, we don't exist, because then they're like, okay, good, well, we won't see you on the streets then, will we?
Yes. They have they have a book as well, obviously, the anti-fascist handbook.
Yeah, Mark Bray, yeah. But if they don't exist, then none of this organising is necessary. All of this can go away. That's gone. Psh, poof.
So those
puff,
people running around dressed in black then would just be individual thugs.
All those people with the same...
Arrest every single one of them.
I'm just watching
Breach
a
of the
clip
peace,
here.
sir.
I mean,
I'm just watching a clip here where Antifa seem to be outside a bakery in Cleveland, Ohio, wanting to smash it up and having second thoughts because the Italian family that seems to run it is standing in the doorway with guns. And funnily enough, everybody seems to be walking away.
I don't know how America is going to deal with the Antifa problem, because if they bring in a law, it can't be retroactive, right? It's just going to be if anyone engages in X behaviour from now on. But in Britain, for instance, we have precedent because obviously we had things like the black shirts here, and it's actually illegal to wear a uniform to protest. So if all you need to do is designate the Antifa standards including their flag as part of their uniform, and that's them done here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But the real problem is the reason that they're out there. You know, what they think is the problem, because what they think is just not true. They've got essentially the same narrative about the West that the black community has in many ways, because they're the ones who have effectively adopted it and molded it. And this is why people like Louis Farrakhan like see outside influence on the black community through racial terms and things like this. Like I don't know, man. I think we're just fucked.
The more
I think, fuck.
That's an encouraging take.
I have come up with 2 plans, Sargon. Have you seen my plans?
I'll bring up the plans. Okay,
Well,
I'll read them out. Here we go. AA's plan A.
I've got 2 plans.
This is a 10-point plan. Okay, both of them are 10-point plans. But plan A, you have to explain this up. Part 1: arrest and detain all rioters who can be identified doing violence or looting. Part 2: arrest and detain everyone who sent money to the protesters, including celebrities. Arrest and
I don't like this though. I don't like where this is going. Right?
I know it's more and more authoritarian.
Yes, and
it's necessary.
Ready?
No.
Let me read. I'll finish reading the plan, and then we can throw our aspersions or condemnations and whatnot, and AA can be thrown under a bus. Arrest and detain any official, including Democrat mayors or governors and police chiefs, who's voiced support for the riots. It's
a bit far.
Conduct FBI investigation into the decisions of these people in all cases.
Right. So, this is the fascist plan, right?
Of course it is, right? Suspend the right to operate of any media outlet who is cheering on the riots. Once in detention, all rioters and their supporters must undergo re-education. The gulags are here, Sargon. Police to shoot rioters on sight. Public protest banned under emergency rules until this threat is eliminated. Presidential elections to be postponed until public law and order restored. Congress to be suspended until the same.
Sorry, why are we doing this?
AA?
Just to end the Antifa threat, AA.
Correct.
Right.
If this is not a national emergency, what is?
Okay, so by how long do the presidential elections need to be postponed?
Until as long as order is restored.
Right. So this is China's manifesto to end the Antifa problem.
It's just, I think, are you taking your line here from your Sheev simping, AA? Are you just like, this is what Palpatine would have done? Who's the Jar Jar Binks who's going to bring this in?
I was trying to come up with a plan that would put an end to the sorts of nonsense that we're seeing. It
would work, but it would come with too many caveats and problems.
When 150 cities are in flames, you have to start getting hardcore.
Apparently, it was only 40 major cities.
All right, 40 major cities. What difference does it make?
I know. That's why I said it in the way I said it.
I think. I mean, aside from your just shoot rioters on sight, which is definitely going to cause issues. But you know, this is a thing of you must just hold people to the same standard of the law. And it's like, you must uphold the law. People seem to be terrified now to uphold the law. The police even more so. It's like the police seem to be in two minds. There's the one part who have decided, fuck this, and they're macing even the reporters who are trying to report on the riots. And then you've got the other side where they're so they're pussying out completely, and they're like, we're just going to let them basically burn it out. Get the energy out of them, like, rowdy kids. There doesn't seem to be a single, basic, consistent way of approaching this, even on a statewide level, which is where you would expect there to be the consistency. There is no authority figure in government or in local areas who is standing up and setting a precedent and basically saying, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to deal with it, because everybody just seems to be either too scared to deal with it or are taking it to a massive extreme. Does that make sense?
I would just like to point out that this plan is a classical liberal plan and not a fascist plan. The monopoly on violence belongs to the state. in a liberal
I
society.
appreciate that this is a Hobbesian plan,
Right. These terrorists, which is what they are destroying private property, being aided and abetted by various elites. They must be brought to heel and brought to account and be told in no uncertain terms that this is against the founding principles of America.
Okay,
And
so
that
if you were to do something like this, right, the best way I think would be to actually do what you're proposing to the elites who have been cheering on.
Yes. Okay. So you
That
just
would be
say
easily the most effective deterrent, because everyone would look at the famous person that you've gulagged and whipped to death in the labor camps or whatever it is you're planning to do, and
Yeah.
they'd be like, "Well, that ain't going to be me," you know.
yeah.
And then no one's cheering it on all of a sudden because
yeah,
you've gulagged them all. You don't need to shoot every rioter on sight because you're the worst dictator ever.
Well,
It's
one
just-
thing
it
I would-
just-
one
it just
thing I
strikes
would
me-
like to ask, one thing I would like to ask, and that is, on point 7, the police will be given authority to shoot rioters on sight.
Yeah.
I mean, shooting. No.
It just
I mean,
sorry, Brisha. It just reminds me of that scene in what is it?
Extreme.
Is it Schindler's List? Where there's the guy who runs Auschwitz, and he's literally just got like prisoners are walking across, and he gets his rifle out and shoots the guy just
No.
for fun, just because.
No. I mean, I am actually, slightly, somewhat siding with AA here, at least on that point.
Yes.
Ow, ow.
That is that if you can watch any film, any disaster movie, or any sort of major disasters where rioting, looting has occurred afterwards. There is always a threat from the authorities that looting will not be tolerated, and looters. Oh no, sorry, I misread it. Yeah, it's rioters on site. Yeah, when it comes to looters on site.
Yeah,
I
I
think
phrase, isn't it? Looters will be shot on sight. And
but that's not the same
if
as
you-
rioting.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yes, if you actually would put out a message, and you really would follow in quite hard, and you would say, okay, there is now a curfew. Yeah, you've basically been burning and looting and whatever, but from now on, after 10 o'clock, if we find anybody looting any stores or whatever, we'll just shoot on sight. Then I think
that's still pretty
you'd more than
heavy-handed,
likely
but,
also get
yeah.
rid of quite a few of the rioters who don't want to be mistaken for looters.
Look at how far we've fallen. This is the liberal plan. Liberalism is about defending private property rights.
Yeah.
And these criminals are being given carte blanche to terrorize normal citizens. It's not right. It's what they call anarcho-tyranny.
I have absolutely no objection to the law as it is currently laid out being applied. The issue is it is not being applied. There should be people, there should be governors, there should be Congress people who are bringing the police and their states to heel in the way that you describe, but perhaps not as extreme,
So I
right?
think
And saying this sort of thing of, the law must be applied. The law says it is illegal to riot and loot. This does not fall under the premise of protest. So this must be applied.
I think what you're saying is, in that case, that it's not that these, the governors and mayors and whatever, they ought to be gulagged or whatever. I think it's that you're effectively saying that if they are not enforcing the law as it ought to be enforced, then they should be done for negligence in office.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Okay. I mean, it's a draft, so you can write it.
Shall we? Let's check out Plan
It's a
B.
rough draft. Let's go with it like that. Yeah.
Here's Plan B. Part 1. All red states to separate from the USA.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Democrat voters to be expelled from the red
No.
states.
May I just suggest a different word there? Not separate, secede.
Secede,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Because it would
just-
be secession, wouldn't it? And I think they've had that before once.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyone with links whatsoever to Antifa to be expelled from red states. Anyone with a criminal record to be expelled from red states. Anyone with a history of voting
This is just
Democrat.
a wish list for you now, isn't it?
Anyone who has ever voted Democrat to be refused right of entry to red states. Any organisation who has given funds to Democrats or
So
Democrat
Charlie's Plan Part
affiliates
2, right,
to be
okay.
expelled. Anyone with a degree in gender or race studies to be expelled from red states. anyone who has ever had a blue check mark on Twitter who does not fulfill 2, 3, 4, 5, or 7 must wear a blue check mark at all times.
Oh,
100% freedom of exit for those who would like to leave. 0% immigration from any destination in the entire world for 100 years.
Why put a limit on it?
Including the poor red voters in Democrat states who are now trapped there with all the rejects from your red state utopia.
Effectively, what you're saying is Count Dankula is already one step towards being barred from the red states,
I'm also curious.
given that he has a blue check mark.
I'm also curious, like under this sort of similar plan, would you not be ineligible to live in Britain if it was applied in a similar way here, AA, given your voting record?
Yeah, well, it's a plan for America.
Yeah, it's like Hitler wasn't blue-haired and blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
Again, there may be, it's just a draft. You know, I only wrote it in 5 minutes, but maybe maybe there could be provisions for like Republican voters to enter if you can prove that like you've got a history of last 3 elections.
I know your Discord server, AA, has had a re-education centre where you've basically educated people on economics and then determined whether or not they can stay. Are you going to be well, it's been over 20 years since you voted Democrat. You must go to this re-education centre until we know where you stand.
Look, let me just. I mean, this all seems absurd, but think of the society that you live in, and how totalitarian it is in the other direction. And what I'm thinking of is, how are you going to correct? How are you going to correct for this? How are we going to unindoctrinate all of these insane people at this point? Because the only solutions that I can think of at the moment, either if the country is going to stay together, it's going to involve force in the manner that I laid out in Plan A. It might not be as extreme as that, but the point is, it's going to have to be pretty hardcore. Or you have the second scenario where the USA ends up balkanizing in some way. And I think it's realistic. I honestly believe it's realistic, because how do you pull together a society that has become as polarized as America has? And also, if you're in one of the red states right now, and can you imagine, like, do you actually want to be part of the same country where all of this other stuff is going down? I don't know. I wouldn't want to.
Well, fundamentally, it has to be that the extreme left is wrong, right? That whatever we do, it's got to be with the intent of making them understand that their worldview is untenable for the United States. And there's the Republican side, if they represent the pro-USA side versus the anti-USA side, the people in there have to be explained to, in some way, given a narrative, that there is value in the pro-USA side. That's got to be the bedrock of what we do, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, but with respect, presenting the arguments hasn't worked, does it?
Well, no. For the extremists, no, and yes, we have allowed them to fester. But the problem is lack of addressing them, right? The only reason that these, I mean, like, look at Hindi Andrews, right? On fucking Good Morning Britain, he's literally saying to Piers Morgan's face that the British Empire is worse than Nazi Germany, and Piers Morgan is too much of a fucking fat gammon to do anything about that statement. He doesn't even engage with it, and so millions of people are like, fucking hell, really, Tris? I don't know anything about it, but he's a professor of African studies, so he must know. And Piers Morgan's a fucking moron and doesn't know anything. And it's just like, like, that's how this proliferates. That's how this sinks into a bedrock of like cultural ideas, I think. And so these have to be uprooted. It doesn't matter what brutality you inflict upon them, because the true believers who are keeping their mouths shut will just be like, well, we can see the problem there. You are exactly as described. Look how brutal you're being, right? So you just reinforce their narrative. But there are millions of people in the narrative. So we need to get the moderates who don't really know and have just heard one side. We need to draw the strength of it away.
Yeah, but Sargon, don't forget the force applied to if Piers Morgan came back on him and started arguing, you know, all hell would break loose.
But it should.
But what I'm saying is that the left's worldview is actually backed by force and law.
Yeah.
And that needs to be overturned through
Okay, no,
force and
Piers
law.
Morgan is an acceptable sacrifice. Like Piers Morgan getting fired from Good Morning Britain for saying that British Empire wasn't worse than Nazi Germany. That is exactly the battle we want to fight.
But
The-
I
That is
agree with you
exactly
in
the battle we
principle.
want to
I
fight.
agree with you in principle, Sargon, particularly with that example, Kehinde Andrews, because it proves that it's always the academics.
But it also proves that the point is
I mean,
saying we're worse than Nazi Germany is saying we are the worst.
yes,
Like Nazis are the worst, and if we're worse than them, if we can't prove that we're not better than the Nazis, then we're lost, aren't we?
the right
know?
needs to be able to recapture moral language. It
Mm.
kind of disappeared. I think, especially when Tony Blair won, but effectively because they reused it, but also there's a lot of stuff. I mean, Britisher talks, and it's a bit of a meme, that how much you hate Mary Whitehouse, Britisher.
Indeed.
But and the moralizing of the right. But I think like they went away from that because it wasn't winning them things. They went too far. And similarly with the left now is going too far, and there's being this backlash. We're looking at in Britain, for instance. The red wall at the top of Britain is now moving towards the Tories because people can see how insane the left are, because their moral puritanism is getting too extreme. But the right has yet to recapture the moral language and use it effectively in order to shift its positions, because humans aren't rational, and rationality doesn't rule.
No, it's not that. What it is because people aren't religious anymore. That's what it is. You can't make Christian arguments. So what you've got to do is find some other base to operate from. I mean, I don't know, Kantian ethics. I don't know, but the left's in fact, that's what the left argues from, and they're very effective at it. They're very effective at it, and the right just doesn't have any answers to any of this. And the thing is, like, it's not moralizing that is the problem, really. They're annoying. Moralizers are annoying, but the people who are great rhetoricians are those people who speak with moral force without nagging you, without telling you that you're a bad person. So they just construct a positive vision of the worldview they're looking for.
The Jordan Peterson.
Yes, right, and like all throughout history, these are the sort of people, and the right has seems to have lost the ability to do that. Like, what's the grand future that's being proposed here? What is the moral? Why would I do this? You've got to give them that.
Yeah, what's the future that we can, for all the rhetoric that we get? Again, I can only really pull from the UK.
The problem is like the wall of left-wing academia that has been built up to prevent such a thing is unbelievably sophisticated.
Yeah,
and it's
a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, but it's amazing. I learned. I was seeing like it in action, like the results of it in action in my discussion with Hugo and Jake and Jangles the other day, right? When me and V were there, because all I was essentially doing was just constructing a kind of unassailable position down the middle, and at no point did I feel like I was off balance there, apart from at the end where he's like, "Give me the grooming gang stats." I'm like, "Fuck's sake, I don't have it now." But like pointing out that like the American identity to them is hollow. They've destroyed all form of identity. It's like you could see them just all they could try and do is invalidate what I was saying, but I was just saying things that I think were demonstrable. So it's that like Jangles looked like he was about to have a fit. He was like sweating and pale and like constantly nervous with his hands. I'm like, I've seen this guy debate like Zarathustra's Serpent, where he is effectively on the attack, and he's like Zarathustra's Serpent's the one on the defense, and he's very calm, And so I was watching this, and I was like, shit, this guy's language really gives away that they're not providing anything positive whatsoever. It's just about making sure that you can't build something positive in their place. And so effectively we need to just take the most unassailable thing, even if it's really not very original, inventive, or world breaking, and push through with it. Like the thing that is the complete opposite of what they are.
I mean, I've had a message from Binary Surfer here, who comes on Unpopular Opinions, and does he ever come on here, Mark? I don't know.
He's been on a couple of times. But...
Yeah, I mean, he's saying that for as much as you'd like to lecture them on morals, these people will stamp on your head. You're facing an opponent who wants to kill you and your way of life.
Yeah, but
so you have to respond accordingly.
Yeah, but it's about overall belief. That's. I'm glad he said that, because that's what I'm trying to get at, right? Like, we're talking inspirational, idealistic worldview. You know, what is the utopia that is being offered? And nobody on the right is offering any kind of utopia. You know, with good measure. That's why they get things done. You know,
But with respect,
these people need it.
with respect, would you sit down and try to reason with ISIS members, or
Yeah, of course I would.
or yeah, if they're trying to come and kill you, surely the response is you have to take them out.
If there's an immediate danger, sure.
Well, it's like,
But,
who was that chap? Because you had a talk with him, didn't you, Sargon? The chap who convinced all the KKK members, like over 1,000 of them, to hang up.
Daryl Davis. Yeah,
Daryl
I didn't
Davis.
talk with him myself. But yeah,
and he, like, I mean, he's the guy who sat down with effectively his equivalent of ISIS and convinced them to go away. And he made like more than 1,000 of them turn away. And Lord knows how many more people were dissuaded because of his story and the talks that he's given over time. You know, in easing race relations.
So I mean, talking, and the thing is, obviously, you're going to get the diehards who will never believe a word you say and never listen to anything that you say, right? But you don't have to. They're not really the problem. The problem is that they can gather a following. You know, and it's that the followers are listening. You just have to actually speak to them in the language that they understand. Like, they're searching for answers. That's why they go to these places, like these intellectual and moral places.
You have to understand that every single person is on an intellectual journey. Like, as cringe as that sounds, right?
Maybe not every single person.
Yeah, right. But it's like, for the same reason that we criticize, that it's easy to criticize Antifa, in the sense that it's like, even if they punch a Nazi, right? Like, that does nothing to change that person's views. It does nothing to do anything else. Like, the same reason that we would criticize, something like carpet bombing the Middle East, because if you kill someone's family member, it radicalizes them against the West anyway, and then they fall in with the crowd, with the religious ideologues who want to overthrow everything in the name of their religious ethno state. Because they're looking for a way to get back. In the same way, you do that if you're constantly attacking groups of people who are not Nazis, but you keep calling Nazis. All you do is radicalize more people against them. Then you see the creation of things like the Proud Boys.
Yeah, but okay. So the thing is, right? I can't help but notice that the framing that you use sounds like sort of treating people as a means to an end, right? If we just persuade these people, then we can win the culture war, we can win the elections, we can stop the West from being ruined, etc., etc., right? But I'm trying to think of it as like, what is that individual doing? What do they believe? What's going on there? What is the sort of inspiration that makes them do things, right? And I think it's really important, because and I think this is why the right's so good. It's like, look, we're going to bring about communism. It's going to be luxury. There's going to be no problems. It's going to be Star Trek, baby. You're probably going to get kicked in the. Actually, you'll learn a lesson, right? That's a much more difficult thing to sell to people who are looking at the magnitude and the enormity of the problem, being like, yeah, maybe the communists are right,
Yeah, I do actually agree with you, Sargon. I think you guys there? What happened to the screen?
Yeah, I'm still here. My screen blacked out for a second. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Okay. One of the issues I think the writers had is that the argument from the likes of a Milton Friedman or Thomas Sowell are completely utilitarian. They're completely it's all just economics, or it's kind of if then why, if Y then X outcome, essentially is the argument that they make. And I think the thing that really motivates people, the thing that through history has motivated people, has actually been non-material ideas.
Yeah.
A vision that is, it isn't based on standard of living or what your income is or anything like that. And it has to be bigger. It has to be bigger than yourself or even your family. It has to be,
it has to be about saving the fucking world. It has to be saving the
That's
world.
What all these kids want to do. That's why they do it.
I suspect that the sort of people on the right, it has to be smaller than the world. based on Jonathan Haidt's moral
I'm not
foundation.
Well,
talking
not
about people on the right.
not
We've already
even.
got those people.
We've already got the
Right? What is it about the leftists that is drawing them to the left? Well, they're going to save the fucking world. Okay, well, how's the right going to save the world? That's what they have to answer. And when you get that question, then you can win.
Because the left, like
And-
everyone
and
who supports
unfortunately,
Greta Thunberg,
reality is such that we
I
can't
know,
do the world.
but everyone who supports Greta Thunberg,
We can't do the world because
everyone-
people want to kill each other.
everyone who's
At the end
looking,
of the day, so
I think you undersell it.
a big part of it. No, but in my view, a big part of people who are on the left is an inability to face reality, and
Yeah.
some of the tough truths of reality are such that you're not going to achieve global world peace. All people are not the same. You know, all of these are just fantasies. They're juvenile, infantile fantasies. And okay, if you want to compete with him, if you want to compete with Cloud Cuckoo Land kind of unicorn dream, that's not going to work, because the right can't ever provide that, because reality and real life isn't unicorn dreams, unfortunately.
But how many left wingers from California did that convert?
and not to mention, like historically speaking,
it
how
didn't
many
convert any of them,
how
right?
many
None of them. They've all turned off when you said none of this is real and you're fucked. Right? I honestly don't think any of them will listen to that. But like, I think there is a way of framing right wing beliefs in a narrative of saving the world. It's just much broader and it's more complicated than the left narrative, and there needs to be a way of boiling it down into, because like the narrative would be around the excellence of the individual, right? It would be very Aristotelian. It'd be about, look, you know, this person he's got a good life, he's doing well because he's a good person, he does the right thing, he makes the virtuous choice between vice and excess and deficit, he does the right thing, and therefore you can see the thing, and he becomes a composite of the grand tapestry that is society, and this can be everyone. You know, this can be everyone. And then we have saved humanity. You know, we have saved the world because nobody has been left behind, because we all understood we have choices and we have an ethical duty to follow. You know, you could create the sort of big right-wing narrative. I'm not saying I can personally do it, but I think it could be there, you know. Friendly desperately needs that.
Ask not what your country can do for you,
Yes.
but what you can do for your country.
Exactly. And that's where you need to be able to derive secular duties. This is why I was talking about, you know, do women have a duty to have children? And the left's opinion on this is just no. It's like, what the fuck do you mean no? Who else is going to have children? Oh, no one. Well, what if everyone decides not to have children? Well, then society goes extinct. And I asked Hassan Piker in Destiny this. Do we have a duty to make sure that our anti-racist civilization continues? And they were just like, I don't know. Destiny's a father. He's got a son. And it's like, yeah, sorry, son. I can't say that you live in a good country or that I'm a good dad or anything's good. It's disgraceful.
it's the lack.
I think we're back to inspiration again, aren't we?
It's the lack of projected values there. It's like, what is good? What is, for lack of a better term, holy?
Yes.
To aspire
Sacred,
to, in the same way, like, even if you take a purely secular view of something like Christianity, I mean, Jordan Peterson talked about this, like, there's the archetype of Jesus as, like, the perfect man, right? And he is a standard, he's whereas before you could have, like, the top crafter in the area, or, like, the top policeman, or whatever, he's, like, everything that could be possibly achieved by anyone ever. That's why he's an archetype. And whilst he's never attainable, it's a standard to strive for.
Yes.
And so, you know, it's kind of looking at that kind of, you know, it's the question of, is there an objective morality, for instance? It's like, well, there might be. We might never be able to achieve it, but we've got to kind of look for it, and try and strive for it. But no one on the right is pushing that. And the left itself is pushing various narratives for it, which are all very divisive. And, you know, the reason the left eats itself is it can never nail down that moral stance. Whereas the right, and I mean this generally, can look at what they can conserve, but that's all they can do, and that will always be eroded because life is always change.
Well, it's more than that, though. The lack of religion on the left really matters, right? It really changes the texture and tone of this, because, like, I get so many Republicans who are really lovely people, you know, totally lovely people, right? And they keep their religious beliefs hidden, right? A little bit now. You have to scratch the surface before they'll start mentioning things like God. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that's good, but they need to be able to give some kind of heroic narrative to why it's good to be right wing. There are
and
loads on the left.
I've done a great deal of reading, as everybody knows. And if I was to point to one thing that seems to weave together all of the right wingers that I've read, from Burke and Carlyle to all of the people around, even Mises to some extent, the closest I can get to is something like this: we are all part of one great organic system,
Yeah, the
and you have
milkman
and you have to
localism.
and you have to embrace your part in that. I mean, it used to be called the Great Chain of Being. We'd have to reframe it, but it's something like you're part of one big living organism that that has had a huge history going back thousands of years, and you are part of this much bigger story, and you're just a way station in that, and you're passing on that. So there's the Burkean social construct between the ancestors and the children, but at the same time you're connected to your fellow man by playing your little part, almost like the Calvinist notion of the calling. That is something that you could kind of work. I mean, I've been working with different
one of the,
ways of it.
You mentioned this. One of the big things that I would like to see return is kind of like is our respect in general for all the working class professions, because it's something which is
yeah, but that's going a bit off of what AA is saying here. I mean that would be a natural part of what AA is saying.
Sorry.
Right. No. It's all right. I'm not rebuking. I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting the scope of what you're saying, because it is big. But I do agree. I think that's a good summation, and I agree that would be something that is heroic. Like especially in the way that they saw themselves in the time, in the sort of the British Empire. There was definitely a feeling about it that it was making the world a better place.
One of the crucial, to Mark's point, one of the crucial things to grasp about this, and this is something I got from actually reading Evola, who's considered quite an extreme thinker in some ways, but in other ways he's just very he's basically explaining what the point of view of tradition is, as opposed to the point of view of modernity. Okay. And he basically says, listen, even in like feudal times, even in times which were extremely hierarchical, there's no shame in being like the peasant or the farmer or you're all playing your part in it, if that makes any sense. And in fact, a really good like farmer or like peasant laborer doing his bit is actually better than a bad king.
So what you're saying effectively is you want a society which says you can be everything, you can be anything, but it doesn't mean you should.
Exactly, and there's no shame in like the person who is just like, I think one of the things that I mean certainly me and probably you as well, Sargon, growing up in like Tony Blair's Britain, I was a kind of late teenager when Blair came to power. Was this kind of way of there's only one path, and the only way to make it is through education or through like getting one of these traditional professional jobs or becoming a doctor or a lawyer, as if to say all of those other parts of life or all of those other communities are just like shit to be looked down upon, and that's not healthy for any society. And in some ways the Victorians had a more some Victorians had a more healthy attitude towards this, which is to say, well, this is a bricklaying area, and these guys are proud of being bricklayers, and there's no harm in that. There's no trouble in there.
I mean, in general, I don't think that British society is actually condescending towards working class professions. They understand that they're necessary and it needs to be done well. But I mean, I come from a working class family, my family are manual laborers.
It's not even that though. I mean, you say that, but I observe all the time people who are told by their parents, basically, it's not just aspire to more. It's like, don't go into what I did. Like, especially when it comes to the manual labouring stuff, because many of them have. Yes, it's fine. Bless you. Have issues with their back or with their knees or whatever. I don't know a gardener who hasn't slipped a disc at some point, and all of them are, they want to get their kids as far away from that as possible, to the point where there are a huge number of kids who get just like shoved off to university, where it's like the attitude is not necessarily that, working class profession bad, as much as like I needed to do something which was beyond that, and then they end up taking a course which they're not really interested in, or they don't really enjoy, and they waste a load of money and time and still lost at the end of it.
I don't know. I mean, like David Starkey makes a convincing case for the idea of like what he calls the sordid arts, the arts that are done with the hands, having always been looked down upon in British society. Like, he does make a case for it, but I guess because like I come from the lower end of British society, it's not something that particularly manifested. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. My family is like my grandparents were builders, my uncle's a builder, and all sorts. And I mean, aside from the fact that they made like my granddad made basically no money in the profession, and my uncle makes absolute bank nowadays.
That's good.
It's an interesting dichotomy there. And I think the money has come back to these professions because so many people are now like looking at university rather than those professions. But I feel like that those people who were always going to end up in manual labouring jobs just because they're more physically gifted with their hands, and like my brother, for instance, is a royal engineer, and he just he's just always had a gift for physical things. He's always solved problems with his hands. He never really thinks things through in the intellectual space. And he's a smart guy, but he that's his gifting. And there are people there, and I do feel that those people who lack articulation, right, who are not unskilled but lack articulation, really struggle to make their point of view heard in that regard, and then so they're kind of looked down on for that.
Yeah, the tyranny of the academics is a real thing. Like Jangle's just, I've got studies, I've got data, and every 5 seconds, can I give you a study? It's like, okay, but it's not going to change my point, because my point is why you're bringing the study up. That's what I'm challenging. So it doesn't matter what the study says. Like the interpretation of the damn thing is what we're talking about here. So yeah, I totally get it, and this is it does create that kind of cognitive aristocracy, and that's the thing. Like anyone living at the bottom of the cognitive aristocracy, they're always going to be told that that's not good enough. Well, okay, but then it's not a choice, is it? So if it was a height aristocracy, well, I'd always be mediocre.
I definitely haven't had to bend down for any selfies with you, Sargon. That's sort of saying.
Well, I'm 5'9". I'm taller than academic agent, but like, I'm totally average. I'm totally average. So like, I would have no exceptional qualities,
So I've just got because I feel like we've tangented here quite a lot. But I want to just talk about one more story, really, and then I'll run through the super chats and we'll bring the stream to a close. But completely aside from anything to do with the George Floyd thing, Hong Kong has been going under the radar because China has basically said we're putting the boot down in China now.
Yeah.
And Hong Kong had they have this tradition of holding a vigil for the Tiananmen Square victims, which obviously doesn't rub quite the wrong way with China, and so they're banning that particular
I am
memorial,
surprised.
which is what a surprise! First time in 30 years that's been banned. So the real question is, like, out of all of this, on the international scene, what are the other great superpowers of the world, China, Russia, and to a lesser extent now India, really going to do things? Because they see the West simping effectively over the riots and the protests, and not putting their foot down and being a weak people. How does this affect what they're going to do in future, knowing what they can get away with?
No idea. We're fucked. Like, China's
So
Well, I mean,
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here, but
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to China, my position is quite clear. I would much prefer a Cold War, and I know this would come with enormous economic pain, which we will already have to go through anyway. So it would make it much, much, much worse. But I have never been able to understand how we have been building up China to become a new Cold War rival, which we seem, it seems almost inevitable that it will happen. And it's now, to my mind, it's a matter of whether it happens at a moment of their choosing or ours. And I would sooner it being a moment of our choosing, because frankly, how much more powerful do you want to make them?
I think the thing that really, for me, it's like, do you ever expect mercy from the Communist Chinese Party? And they haven't shown a lot of mercy so far, in my opinion. So I don't think I would. I don't want to be in their power.
Well, I mean, just look what they did with Australia just for simply asking for an investigation into the coronavirus.
What did they do?
They first, they sort of slagged them off in the press and all sorts of things in China, but then they immediately put a tariff on, I forget what grain it is, but some grain that comes from Australia. They immediately put a 80% tariff on, making it obvious that you couldn't possibly hope to export anything to China.
Yeah.
But the implied threat was clear. You now either fall in line, or we will start putting tariffs of this magnitude onto other things that you export to us.
Yeah.
Because, of course, mining is massive in Australia, and
To
the
China.
workshop of the world is China, and they are therefore the ones who consume all these minerals.
Yeah.
Right, gents. I think we're a bit tuckered out for this evening. I know I am. So I'm gonna run through the super chats. If you need to dash, do feel free to. But we'll go through these as we go. Let me see. Yiz the Eunuch says the boog is finally here, and I couldn't be happier. As we all know, Yiz is a prepper. She's been going for this. Makuta Pterodact says, just as you think 2020 can't get any worse, earthquakes near Yellowstone today. The earth shudders.
Oh, fucking hell.
The seventh.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, there's basically a massive volcano brewing under Yellowstone Park, as I understand it.
Super volcano.
Yes, I believe it is
it's
one single volcano, isn't it?
Yes, and it's overdue an eruption apparently, and it's fucking hell. It's the last thing that people need.
Well, perhaps God is just looking down and has thought, no, this is just not worth it anymore.
You people elected Democrats. Sorry, I think the left is cancerous at the moment.
I know. Brian says, we need a name for the generation in charge at the time of the Civil War. Their failure to deport the Krogan back to their home continent after emancipation is the greatest failing in the history of the country. Complete lack of will, blinded by idealism.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Decade UK says 7-Eleven just released a Slurpee in honour of Floyd.
Okay,
Cringe. Matthew says an independent autopsy found George Floyd died of asphyxiation caused by neck and back compression. Contrary to the police autopsy, this will go well. If there's any conjecture around it, I think it's going to get messy, or messier, I should say. But I need to read that for myself.
So just to interrupt, just a bit of breaking news. It turns out Florida is based in red-pilled academic agent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this looks like a sheriff in Polk County in Florida. I can't watch the audio, but the quote from Fox 13 Tampa Bay is, the people in Polk County like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns.
Nice. Like,
is that based enough, academic agent?
This is the kind of sheriff that should be chasing Burt Reynolds across the country in a fast car.
Yeah.
He is awesome. But the thing is, do you think there's going to be any looting in Polk County?
I doubt it at this point.
Exactly.
No, I mean, in fact, I've been waiting for them to move into like a Republican area or like where white people live. But
oh yes, because as soon as it hits the white Republican suburbs, it kicks off, doesn't it?
Well, it's not the suburbs of Republican, like California, like Beverly Hills or something. But they've got guards. But yeah, when it gets to like the middle class Republican voting, gun owning sort of families, that's when people are start getting shot. Like like with the authorities, just like, yeah, do it. It's like, okay. I mean, they're not wrong. They're not wrong.
So this reminds me, I need to get myself a Callum. But
Yeah.
Imperator of Benera says, "Are you ready to get annexed by China? They've already entered India, which is dealing with a Sikh independence movement. Wonder who's next."
Yep.
Oh dear. Not sure how to deal with that. We'll have to research it. Matthew says, disproportionately, 75% of those cops involved in George Floyd's killing were not white, but only whitey goes down. White privilege, I suppose. Michael Kelly says, this might be the end of the Republic.
Yeah.
That Indian dude says, gotta be honest, boys, I just witnessed an implosion of a superpower live streamed.
Yeah.
The right-wing theory says, Robert Eckhart here, AA, on Sargon stream, you said America needs a two-state solution, but where would the borders be? Also, am I still invited on UO tomorrow? You asked me to remind you.
Who was that? Sorry.
Robert Eckhart.
Yes, that was the person I couldn't remember. Robert Eckhart. Get in touch with me on Twitter or through the Discord, etc., etc. Yep.
Charlemagne says, here in the South, everyone stays away from jogger neighbourhoods. We all implicitly know why. Separation already exists as an informal reality. No comments. Nathan Hood says this.
That's not uncommon either. When I was hanging out in New York with some people who you will all know of, they basically say the same thing about some neighborhoods in New York. You just don't go to them. It's just understood.
It's like there's a thing which psychologists use, which is like this little resource. I think it's called like squares and triangles, or circles and triangles, or something. And basically, it's just like this is the influence of in-group preference. Like, and you can set the amount of in-group preference. And if it's like, you can set it to like 3%, and it doesn't matter. As long as it's over 0, then eventually you end up with like completely segregated neighborhoods, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Given this fact, which is the hardest revealed preference, because I've talked about this so many times, right? Imagine, for most people, moving house is one of the biggest decisions they make in their life. Okay, especially if they've got a mortgage or if they've got kids, it's a massive deal to move for most people, and yet they persistently take this choice. The biggest decision in their life, but they persistently do it. White flight is one of the hardest revealed preferences in all of economics, and it's been observed for decades now, if almost a century of data on this. So the question is, given that we know this fact, at what point do people start admitting this rather than essentially just being chased around the map, which is what's happened?
Well, the thing is, it is admitted by the left, and it's a fault. So people don't want to just admit that they do.
Right. So my point was this: those people who are against that, for example, or those people who have these views, they are the ones who should be forced at gunpoint. And this is not when you laugh, but when desegregation
at gunpoint,
right, when desegregation happened, what happened was
that's true.
Is that kids were forced at gunpoint to go into schools with black children. Okay, and they were bussed in. So what should happen is virtue signalers of this sort should be forced to live in black areas, for example, forced to live with these people, and then we will see how long they maintain their views for. Okay, they should also be not allowed to leave for a certain period of time, and this is what I'm saying. The only way to because it's all well and good. All right, you said, like, you put on Twitter, oh, isn't it awful? I support the riots. Meanwhile, in your real life, you've made the biggest decision of your life to move away, and there'll be a cope. It'll be like, oh, it's for the schools, or it's for the it's for the neighborhood or something. But really, you know the reason they're doing it. So I'm just saying, at some point, we're going to have to be honest. As everybody's going to have to be more honest about these things in the future. That's all I'm saying.
Not so obvious. Didn't you have an example on Twitter that somewhat illustrates the tendency that AA was just alluding to?
Yeah, there's a Chris Martin Palmer. His handle is Chris Palmer NBA, so presumably that's his job. Says there's a photo of a burning building, and he says, "Burn that shit down, burn it all down." And then 3 days later, They just attacked our sister community down the street. It's a gated community. They tried to climb the gates. They had to beat them back. Then destroyed a Starbucks and are now in front of my building. Get these animals the fuck away from my neighborhood. Go back to where you live. It's like karma is a predictable beast, is it not?
There is something sort of about unwitting humour, isn't there?
It's just a touch.
It couldn't be more perfect, could it? I mean,
yeah. Illustrating everything. One can hope that he learned something from it, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
Nathan Hood says, this should be a wake-up call. The people that push safe spaces, censorship, identity politics, etc. want to destroy the West. They cannot be reasoned with. They want you destroyed. We must fight. There you go, AA. You've got your supporter right there for either plan A or B.
Well, of course, they're excellent plans, and I will maintain they may sound draconian, but in days gone by, right? You imagine how the Victorians would have responded to this, the actual classical liberal society, and they would have not batted an eyelid to respond in the way that I'm talking about. Not batted an eyelid.
It's a very Victorian response. I agree.
Put it like this. I mean, folks know I have a certain penchant for a certain ancient civilization.
For degeneracy.
So obviously, there was the famous case of Claudius, who then had his street battles with Milo, when they basically when they unleashed their sort of mobs onto the streets of Rome. The way that was brought under control was with Pompey Magnus effectively putting the streets, the legions onto the streets, and enforcing order again. So you can look at that situation. So basically, the Republic then kind of goes on from there. But you can look at that example, or you can look at the example of Sulla, who had his proscriptions, who had his political enemies killed outright.
That's my recommendation, AA.
And
Sulla died a happy man.
And this is where I see the difference. So there are two
no
different
friend
approaches.
Did me well, nor enemy wronged me, who I haven't repaid in full.
There are sort of two hardline approaches, and I would agree with the Pompeian version. As in, yes, you need to clamp down here.
Pompey got his head cut off.
The moment that it then goes into the Sullan version, which is kind of, now I will start drawing up lists of the people I don't like.
Yes.
That's where I depart.
But Sulla's the guy who actually did something productive here, right? Pompey lost the civil war. Sulla actually won and lived out the rest of his days in peace. He didn't even retire from being the dictator.
Oh, he did retire.
Yeah.
Yes.
So who's got the successful example here?
But British,
Pompey Magnus didn't end up having his head cut off in Egypt because he relented with his troops in Rome. I mean, those two things were unrelated to each other.
I don't know. All I'm saying is rounding up all your political opponents and executing them spares having to do it to the general populace. It provides an example, and
you could then take the next prescriptions, which was Octavian, who then becomes emperor. So again, you could say it shows that it works.
It definitely works.
in following that same logic, one who was even more keen on that very same prescription.
Yes.
Was Mark Antony, and he had Cicero done.
Yeah, so 2 out of 3.
Well, Mark Antony also ended up dead in Egypt, didn't he?
Yeah, but 2 out of 3, better than better than the opposition, which is just failures.
I just want to note that my plan A did not involve drawing up lists. It was anybody who it was the rioters.
It was all leftists, but not lists. Yes.
The list is a humanitarian improvement on your idea here.
No, hold on. It wasn't a list. It was the rioters identified doing looting and violence. It was people who sent money directly to support the riots, including celebrities.
There would be a list of those celebrities, presumably.
I love it.
Right? No, but these are criminals, is what I'm saying. It was any official abusing their power. who voiced support for the riots. It was and it was any media outlet who was cheering on civil disorder. All of those things, I think, are not. That's not making a list. That's basically just bringing criminals to justice.
Yeah.
That's all I've said there. So it's not like any of my political enemies. It's just those people who have been directly responsible for this trouble.
But
I'm
that
not
is
gonna
your
be-
political enemies.
If we would have the situation,
It
now,
is.
I could
You may
well
as well
imagine-
just. But you may as well just say my political enemies rather than give that list. All you're doing is showing how you're going to arrest your political enemies.
Well, no, I mean, I'll give you an example, right? Robert De Niro, right? I know he's a massive leftist,
Yeah.
but as far as I know, I mean, we'd have to look. He hasn't voiced support for the riots or given money to it. If it was found that he had, then he gets arrested. If he hasn't done it, then he's done nothing wrong.
Yeah, but the list is still 100% your enemies who get arrested.
Well, people on my side have not been causing these riots, have they? Or voicing
agree,
support for them or funding them.
But then just say, write a list. My enemies, they can get the gulag.
No, it's not. It's not about my enemies. It's about people who have burnt. What did you say? 40 American cities at this point,
Yes.
or aid and abet in the right. So if you're not prepared, if the civilization is not prepared to defend itself, that's not drawing up a list. They are the enemies of America, not my enemies. The enemies of all of the people who live in those cities too.
All right.
Carry on.
I do agree that looters should be shot. Anyway, Charlotte, where were we? Nathan Wow says, AA, shill your Discord.
Yeah, I've got a Discord. If you go to the last unpopular opinions, you'll see the link in there.
Carter H says, Sargon, check out my email entitled The Original Sin of Racism. The pathetic self-flagellation of my university president is truly abominable. Capitalism ho.
Thank you. Oh.
Harry Angladive says, don't simp for Palpatine. Hashtag simp for real queens.
God's sake.
Good on you, Taffy.
Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says, the day before he died, Floyd apparently posted a video urging youth to end gun violence and how they need good father figures. Worth a watch.
Yeah, I've seen it. He's basically our guy on the fatherless problem.
Patrick says, you are deluded. Reforms to black communities have been tried for decades. They don't want to hear that they are the problem.
Okay, so have you ever seen 7 Periods with Mr. Gormsby?
No.
Wouldn't blame you if you didn't, right? It's this early 2000s New Zealand series, but it's hilarious because basically this class of Maori boys, like problem Maori boys, like I can't remember the name of the class, but they're famous for going through all these teachers, and then they get in like this Victorian Empire era teacher, and he just comes in and he's just like whipping this cane against the chairs and stuff like that, and it's like, sit up, blah blah blah, I'll go get you sterilized like the Goombas in India or something like that. It's just like, okay, but the thing is, the whole point is just to give them discipline and order, and then you see the benefit as the kids improve throughout the season, and it's really good. Like, it's probably on YouTube. It was on YouTube a couple of years ago, and I watched it, and it was genuinely heartwarming. But you can see that there is an aspect of it that really describes the kind of the need for martial discipline that boys have, right? And I think there is something.
You need firm boundaries, something which fathers have traditionally provided. But
yeah, but it has to be provided with the hand.
Yes.
That's the thing. I really think that. Like, there has to be some understanding of a physical barrier to a boy.
Matthew Ivy says, wow, you almost have the entire all-star cast set up. All you need is Louis and the 39 questions from Burnham. You could probably find those online. I'm not familiar with the 39 questions, but there's that. Charlemagne says, the difference between the British and American perspectives on this is that we've already endured 150 years of cultural destruction because of this experiment. You're just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not nearly well prepared to deal with it as well because we don't have the kind of identity and corporation that the Americans do.
George says, I sent this chat hours ago. What the fuck? Thanks for that, man. DeWall says, there is a Boondocks episode where Martin Luther King Jr. wakes up from a coma. The entire episode is letting you know exactly what he would think of today's society and black people.
And what was the conclusion?
I need to know what the conclusion was. A Boondocks episode. I need to find. I'll look it up. Actually, I'll note that down. Binary Surfer says, at what point do we start shutting down media outlets that engage in this? They're literally gaslighting, attempting an actual murder on camera.
Plan A.
Shoot the media.
Hey, the police have been doing that, so you must have been thrilled, AA.
Good. I mean, in all seriousness, the media are very, very accountable for what happened here. They, at a time of lockdown, when it was hot, they whipped up people into a frenzy and basically cajoled. I mean, this is quite a unique riot in a set of riots in history, I would say, because it doesn't really have most of the time when you see civil unrest like this, there's some like economic driver to it, or there's something like people are really hard up or something.
I mean, you say that, but like we've had coronavirus lockdown and all these people have been locked inside for 3 months.
And a lot of them will have lost their jobs.
But this particular one seems to me to be pretty strongly driven by media psyops, essentially, which is I don't know if that's ever happened before. You'd have to check.
Well,
I think
it's
there is a
definitely the
parallel
conjunction.
between this and the Rodney King incident, isn't there?
Yeah, but I think that the fact that we've all been stuck inside, and as you say, many of them have lost their jobs. Like if you essentially telling these people they've got nothing, which they are, then I'm not surprised it's so voracious. You know.
Yep. Bratface says it should be illegal to incite political violence. I mean, it is, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Even in America.
Yeah.
NC says, I live in a suburb of Detroit, and while parts of the city are really nice, there are parts that are never rebuilt after the firebombings of the 68 riots. Wow, that's something, isn't it? Given it's like 50 years on from that now.
Yeah.
Emperor's Rest says, not only organised or funded, many Antifa are spawn of democratic leaders. Tim Kaine's son and de Blasio's daughter have both been arrested for rioting.
Unironically true.
Yeah.
Then that should be investigated. That's obviously not right. That you've got the direct family of people in these Democrat families doing this. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about the father, doesn't it? Surely.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's either completely negligent or he's encouraged it. Pyrrhus of Epirus says, my feelings. Fuck them all. God will know his own. Kathleen Batavian says, who you claimed I was. Wasn't that AA?
Mark, I'm calling this out right now. You've sent a super chat to yourself.
What? No. In euros.
But pretty sure, have I told you about this? Right, there's this person who comes on my channel, and she always comes in the chat saying "Hoi hoi, AA panel or chat," and sometimes like leaves comments. Through a process of deduction, I've worked out that this Kathleen Batavian is secretly Mark. I first caught this because I noticed that Mark tweeted out a comment that was identical to a Kathleen Batavian comment that he left. Right, you just cut and paste it, and then I found out that she can speak Dutch and you can speak Dutch.
I can't speak.
I mean,
Dutch.
come on,
I can't speak Dutch, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
So what would be the purpose of this conspiracy theory?
Yeah.
I mean, why would Mark conspire to appear to be a different person? I mean,
Mark, what happens if we find out you're lying to us about speaking Dutch?
Can you imagine? Like,
then your name
turns
will
out you've
also
got a degree in it or something.
your name will also go on the list.
I don't know what I did. Like for a meme, someone asked me on Twitter randomly. I had no idea about the context. I've never heard from this Kathleen person before. Someone just said, "Do you speak Dutch?" So I like a bit of a meme. I shoved, "Yes, of course I do," into Google Translate, and then posted that up. And then everyone was like, "Conspiracy confirmed." But I couldn't tell you any Dutch for this.
The internet doesn't forget, Mark.
But apparently I'm sending myself money in euros to say the Amsterdam Greens mayor allowed a demonstration about the US situation because it was more important than Corona. It's clear where their priorities lie.
I agree. I mean, you know, anything's more important than Corona at this point, clearly.
Exactly. That's a very salient point, Kathleen. I'm glad that you made it.
You guys don't seem to be taking Corona very seriously at all, so...
Ed B. Visual says, I think people like Kanye West and Anthony Logan should, etc., do tours in poor black neighborhoods promoting the values we've been talking
That would be good.
Well, I know, like, because there are plenty of figures on the left who are, like, sponsoring, like, Stormzy, for instance, sponsors, like, kids to go to Cambridge, I think it is.
Black kids.
Yeah,
to go to Cambridge.
specifically black kids. I think if, just, like, people more on the individualistic side put a bit more work into kind of promote things, like take the idea of taking on proteges and apprentices and whatnot.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with taking on proteges.
Of course not. It's British. Emperor's Rest says, in Minnesota you have a duty to retreat. It's honestly BS. So that's why they're not shooting the looters. They have a duty to retreat.
I guess Minnesota was founded by the French.
That's what I was just about to say.
A duty to retreat. I mean,
I don't
I've
understand.
never heard of such a ridiculous
I
thing,
don't
yeah.
even understand the basic concept behind that. I mean, why would one wish...
What does it mean?
I mean, I could understand if they made a great push, but a great retreat? It doesn't make sense. Michael Kelly says, don't do Civilization 6, do Europa 4. I mean, I've never played either of those games, but apparently they want us to do a three-way all-in thing for that. JS says, stocks and shares in gun companies are on the up. Yeah.
No kidding.
No kidding. EC90 says, Minnesota Twins BB team stadium is called Target Field, as in the store where payment is optional. Got their money's worth in with that sponsorship.
Oof.
That's a spicy take.
Yeah.
Jedi
Disavow.
Anna Quinn Cringewalker says, Britishers should do Crusader Kings 2 instead of Europa 4.
I mean, that stream would take about 18 hours or something to play that game.
Shergar says, if you think this is bad in America, wait till it happens in London. We have no guns and our police are cucked. I see, I don't think the tenor of the British spirit is the same. I don't think it'd be that. Like
also, I mean, I hate to say this, right? But the demographic makeup of London is not the same in America. And say what you want about
it doesn't favour the blacks. Yeah.
Say what you want about the Muslim community, for example, or Indians, but they don't have a habit of doing that. Whereas for some reason this particular community has a very long habit of doing it, not just in America, but also in many places in Africa as well. So I mean, I just don't think they're the riotty type. I'll just put it that way. I mean, what has there ever been an Asian riot in this country? I don't think so.
Well, the Muslim one, probably, yeah. Like, I
Well,
mean,
when?
there's some.
When?
What about the Salman Rushdie stuff? That will look pretty rough.
Not to mention the kids and the homosexual stuff. I mean, not riots really, but they were protests.
No. They've had protests, but the only riot I can think of in recent memory was the 2011 lootings that took place, which was it was that particular crowd. So that crowd is not that big, is what I'm saying. So I don't see them.
Then again, those Danish cartoons were never published here, were they?
I'm sure there was some rioting during the Salman Rushdie thing.
I also don't see like Birmingham residents like destroying their own homes and things like that. I just can't see it happening.
Yiz the Eunuch says, talk about the ludicrous gaslighting in media, please. Well, I find it interesting that the media has refused to call it rioting. Like, there's nothing on the BBC. It's like, protests turn violent. It's like, no. They were never peaceful to begin with. There are plenty of peaceful protests. Like, there are 250 of them going on across America at the moment. But, like, in the areas specifically affected by this at the origin, like, it's clearly riots and looting. You know, they're setting buildings on fire. It's it's ridiculous.
Well, there was that rather comical incident on, I think it was CNN, where there was a reporter there going, well, on the whole, he's actually standing lit from behind, from flames licking up into the sky. And he's there going, well, I must say, on the whole, this is a peaceful demonstration.
It's very much in the vein.
Really much trouble. Yes, some fires have been lit. And you can look at it, and it was just...
I have Leslie Nielsen in front of a fireworks factory going across in my head. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. JS says, AOBC Smith & Wesson stock price up 20% in 4 days.
Wow.
Secular
Reveal preferences.
Secular Sage says, Kanye West predicted this back in 2012. Have you seen his video, No Church in the Wild? It's basically a retelling of recent events.
Really?
I've not seen it, but it's now on my list.
I'll check that out. And also on the subject of Kanye West, have you? People should check out his little heard or talked about single, "Ye versus the People," where he basically kind of raps about like being a Trump supporter with some cuck leftist. It's kind of interesting to listen to. It's really interesting to listen to.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Matthew says, Plan A is just redistribution of accountability. Michael Kelly says, this is what I meant by you are only better because of your lack of power. I assume referencing the moral stances of the left.
The left, yeah.
Mr. Gently, it's like there is no virtue in weakness.
No.
Yes. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, AA's Order 66 plan is based. Palpatine-based leadership is the way to get things sorted. Simping for looters and making excuses just encourages more of the same.
The worst part of this is that my plan is literally just what any normal civilization at any time in history, including our own, including like not just the Victorians. Imagine this had happened in imagine this had happened in, right under no, not even under, imagine it had happened in Clement Attlee's Britain in 1948, for example. You don't think Clement Attlee would have rolled the tanks in? Of course he would have bloody done it. And he would have cracked down on it. Of course he would have.
The interesting thing about this, in particular, is like it seems to be a reflection of what we have in Britain at the moment with regards to sort of, if you're defending your own home, it's like the old man who was done for manslaughter because he stabbed a burglar with a screwdriver in his kitchen.
He wasn't done. He was let off,
but
he was arrested, and everyone was outraged.
Yeah, and that sort of thing.
If it wasn't for the outrage, he may well have been.
And this may be America's turning point, where, in a sense that like they realise how cucked all these Democrat places are when it comes to law enforcement.
I even feel like, even as much as we've demonised in Britisher, I even feel like Tony Blair and David Blunkett and those guys would not have allowed that to happen. They would have come down hard on it. So it's, and that was what, like 10 years ago.
I think
so
Tony Blair would have declared a war on it and then done nothing about it. I think that
I can see where you're coming from. But then, I'm not sure Tony Blair would necessarily have been very hard on it if it would have been,
politically right. I see. Yeah.
I just want to mention here, there's a tweet by someone at LCTZ. I have to say that because he's just got a spider icon as a name. And it says, it's weird, but duty to retreat is a concept we do have. You're obliged to leave your own home and contact authorities rather than intentionally confront an intruder if able. It's obviously difficult to prove failure, but it is a thing in at least some states.
That is so Justin Trudeau. Can I just get back to the Blair thing though?
Yeah.
I actually think if it was left wingers, I think we've seen that nobody hates the far left more than the Blairites. I mean, do you remember the?
With the leaks.
The Labour leaks, Sargon.
Yes, base Labour.
Where's
this gone?
I actually think they'd have come down very hard if it was Momentum or someone like that.
Yeah.
You think it would have been kind of part of a political blood feud on the left?
Yeah.
I bet the Democrats' version of the Blairites are fucking furious at Antifa and the rest.
But that would mean it would still represent something that was politically opportune to them.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Rather than it actually being something based on principle.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Blair wanted to be seen as being tough on crime, and that would have been a great opportunity for him to do that as well.
Austin says, a pawn shop owner who shot a looter whilst defending his store in Minneapolis was arrested and charged with murder. That seems like...
Minneapolis is being run by Trudeau, so...
Yeah. Yiz the Eunuch says, my video appears to have affected Britisher. I don't know about this.
Sorry, what?
I don't... Have you seen Yiz the Eunuch's video? I haven't. I don't
No,
know.
in all honesty, I can't say I have, so I don't know what this is about.
Froggy says, you boys have come a long way since dictator top trumps. Kathleen Batavian, another super chat from my favourite contributor.
From yourself, yeah.
Says, don't you be casting aspersions, I'll have you know it's libel.
I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Full Alex Jones on this.
Yeah, I think it was you.
I love how a bunch of Brits are petitioning a country and redrawing borders. Good old times, you bloody imperialists.
Yes. As long as we can do it with rulers. As long as we can do it with rulers, they need to be straight lines.
Yeah. Well, there's no point making them squiggly. It's just
like,
arbitrary.
When
Straight lines the quickest way.
Unless, of course, it's the Tsar's thumb. Have you ever heard of that one?
No.
I haven't actually.
Hey, you know,
there was some talk of there being a bend in the railway line. I'm not sure which cities. It might have been Moscow and St. Petersburg. I'm not sure. But apparently there might have been a bend in the railway line because the Tsar, when he drew the line with pencil across the map,
oh, yes,
his thumb slightly overlapped it, and therefore it made a bump there. And of course, with it being such an utter autocracy, nobody wanted to kind of
correct him.
Not fulfill the exact plan. Although that could, of course, just be an urban myth, but it's a great story.
I can believe it.
We should never have allowed the Americans to redraw the Middle East. Should have been all grid lines.
One of the things I will say on that, I have been reading this very thick book called Albion Seed about the first about like British America, you know, from 1630 till about 1730. I have to say, the original settlers would not have stood for this at all. And
No kidding.
and in some ways, I can see that the country very much has gone downhill since the founding fathers came in. So yeah.
Pyrrhus of Epirus says, "I'm from Alabama and I approve of AA's plans."
I still say he's from Albania, not Alabama. Being Pyrrhus of Epirus. I'm sorry.
No, he's not from Albania. He's not Slav. Jeez, do you understand the ethnic conflict you're drawing yourself into there, Britisher? I mean it as well. I mean it. No, seriously, go on Twitter and just search for something like Pyrrhus Albania, and I bet you get a load of Cyrillic or whatever language they're using. Arguments come up. I made a video about Pyrrhus a while ago, and man, it was just nothing but raging arguments in the comment sections. And the pro-Slav argument is obviously wrong. No, it's hilariously wrong.
I just like that you just BTFO'd the British show. I should have you more often just to have more saucy history takes.
I wasn't like I'm not saying
it would be difficult to argue that Pyrrhus was a Slav. Yes.
Yes, it's flat impossible. It's ridiculous.
But when it comes to geography, he would have been from that part of the world.
Yes. But that's like saying Constantine the Great was Turkish or something because he came from Cappadocia or wherever he came.
Well, yes, but you have to find a way of taunting the people from Alabama some way, and Albania is just similar. It's just sufficiently similar to do it.
Right, sure. I mean, I'm not from Alabama, but I certainly feel out of my depth with the history going on right now. Pyrrhus of Epirus says, CSA2 Electric Boogaloo, this time, no, didn't do. Thanks for that. Caitlin Tillman says, but how do you account for swing states in Plan B, AA?
Oh, well, that's very easy. You have a vote on where they'd prefer to be. And then all of the people who voted that they would like to be there, if it goes the other way, get to move. Or if it goes the other way, the people who voted against get ejected.
But you said 0% immigration for 100 years.
Yeah, well, I apart from people from like Reds who want to go, like, you know, in the initial makeup of it, you'd have to allow like Republicans who want to be there to go there, but they have to prove they're Republicans or not, at least not leftists. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says, question for Sargo. How many travesties does God have to shove up this year's plump bottom before you accept that divine intelligence can only explain it, and that divine intelligence is quite a dick?
More.
More. I think
Actually,
that's...
no, I just accept. Okay, just in case. Pascal's waging my way out of this, actually.
Yeah,
No harm in saying I believe, right?
That's right. That's why you eat kosher, I suppose.
Well, no, that's not what I don't. Right? But generally, in the idea of a universal God who's not too picky, maybe. No, I don't believe. Sorry.
Anna Quinn Cringewalker also says, "Fun fact: I had to misspell Sargon's name to bypass the YouTube censors. How does it feel to be such a thought criminal that you're literally unnameable?" But this is followed by 2 super chats which say, "This is a test to see if you can type Sargon from Charlemagne and Sargon check. It didn't work the first time, so that's irrelevant."
Right. Okay.
Silly Sailor says Sulla did nothing wrong apart from missing Caesar.
Agree, but he did say he saw it in many a Marius, so he at least was aware of Caesar's duplicity and potential to overthrow the Republic.
Any comment, Britisher?
Caesar was the good guy. The gods were on Caesar's side.
Darn, that makes it right, does it?
Apparently so.
Very much so, yes.
Sorry, where was I?
Sulla did nothing wrong.
Sulla did nothing wrong.
Well, it is interesting that Caesar did not go on an equal killing spree when he had taken over.
So he died. He got stabbed to death.
Well, yes, by the bad guys.
While he was ending the Republic.
So he was the good guy.
By his friends and comrades. I feel like this deserves a stream all of its own. So I think we'll move on.
I think this might go on for a few hours otherwise.
Yes, he did. Yeah. No, he didn't. Yes, he did. No, he didn't.
Well, yeah, but it's not like we're not providing reasons.
It's true. DRT is King says, Justinian Rome had the greens and the blues in Constantinople. He, with his armies, took back the city of world's desire.
Mm-hmm. Was he the one with the metal nose? Justinian?
That doesn't ring a bell. No.
One, or was it Justinian the second? One of the Justinians had like a metal nose.
This rings some distant bell, but I can't put a name to it right now. But yes, the metal nose does ring a bell.
It's not ringing anything for me, I've got to say.
But yeah, with Justinian, the Greens and the Blues, I mean, the Greens and the Blues had always been the two big factions for chariot races. But to a certain extent, they also became kind of political factions, if you know what I mean. And at some point, the Greens and the Blues kicked off to such an extent in Constantinople, they kind of burnt half the city down in a massive riot.
And tell everyone what happened to them.
Well, it didn't end well for them.
What? Well, would Academic Agent approve?
More than likely, yes. But you know, in the end, Academic Agent would kind of point out that they cleared enough room to build the Hagia Sophia.
Yes, that's true. But like, which emperor was it that dealt with it? I can't remember the name of the emperor who dealt with it. But basically, trapped them in the Colosseum or the Hippodrome or whatever it was, and then butchered like 30,000 of them, if I recall correctly.
Yes. They were quite. How shall we say, basic in the way they went about these things.
Yeah, just trapping the two gangs in there and then killing them all with the.
Yes, as such, those riots were possible without racism.
That's true. They weren't
it's
racist
worth
at all.
pointing those things out. So riots as such are really as old as time. You will get them if you kind of have a hopeless underclass. Then once in a while, they will come out to bite you. So yes, that's one of the issues. But you know, one of the overarching issues is whatever you do, don't encourage it.
Yeah. Because
for one, you will most likely not be able to control it, as the likes of Claudius eventually found out,
or indeed CNN.
Yeah, indeed. Yes.
Just on the Justinian nose detail, it was actually Justinian II. He was deposed and his nose was cut off. later replaced by a solid gold replica of his original.
Amazing.
He was then he then went into exile for a number of years, 10 years, and then he came back and had a second reign. So yeah, Justinian II, ladies and gentlemen. So there we go.
There you go. Yeah, I do remember there being one with a fake nose, but yeah, I didn't remember who it was anymore. Sorry.
Avalok says, "It's a peaceful day in Poland, like every day."
That's a good point.
Benjamin says, "Vote AA. Vote for Plan A. Service guarantees citizenship."
I disavow that tweet because I disavow that super chat because I would never dream of coming to power via something as plebeian as a vote. I'd expect it to be via like coup d'etat or even like, I don't know, just being like everybody comes to recognize I'm God's chosen one or something like
I
this.
see. You become a religious figure.
It would be by proclamation, would it?
Yeah,
He is the most
exactly.
based man in the land.
Something like this, yeah. Not
But isn't
by
that a
vote.
form of vote anyway? I mean, sounds like a vote.
Oh dear. The man who voted himself king.
You're just fantasizing about becoming a Palpatine. Aren't you?
Yes.
Although I did say that if I ever try to get involved in politics, everybody should talk me out of it. So talk me out of it. I don't want to be. I don't want to be the king.
Are you somehow going to get Brit Binks to give you emergency powers that you never give up? Sorry. DeWall says, "The man that was beaten in Dallas was in Dallas, not Texas. At this point, Dallas should be considered a city-state. It's a democratic city in a Republican state." All right. Nicholas Perniciaro says, "Modern society has perfected the art of making people not feel necessary. It breeds a nihilistic culture and a feeling of not belonging."
Mm-hmm.
I think we all agree on that one.
There needs to be some like transcendent purpose that you point to that makes people feel special or something.
You know what I feel it should be is like there needs to be some way for it to transition back that families feel. And I hate to use the word empowered, but like at the moment, everything is deflected to the state. Oh, we can't teach our kids about sex education. That's done by the schools. Oh, we can't teach our kids about like, the interactions between different groups. There's like a whole thing on CBeebies at the moment about like how to talk about race to your children. And it's like, why can you not just trust to the family values, to the stuff that you know, to like consider yourself, if not an authority on something, like strong-willed, strong opinionated enough to be able to explain your point of view to your children, and then as alongside, obviously, like giving them the room to express themselves as well. Like it's.
Jesus, I want my kids to stop expressing themselves.
I can imagine.
Well, to a
After
certain
enough
extent,
of it, you're just like, all right, shut up.
100 questions a day? I didn't sign up for this.
Well, to a certain extent, one could say there is perhaps a need for something that is, dare one say that terrible word, collective. It's not just the individual.
Yes, we had.
The simple problem being there are very many ways of misinterpreting the collective to mean something entirely different.
I just don't want the government thinking that. Like, I don't want the government telling me, "Oh, by the way, you're the agent of a greater will." No,
it's
off.
like, fuck you. My community is not your commodity.
Yeah, yes.
How about that?
What it has. I think it's easier if it's more local. I honestly believe these things don't scale up that well.
But I think it is coming around. Like I know there's plenty of people my age, who finally get out into the working world, and then you realise. I mean, I've been in the working world for a while, but it's more like you think about what you want from things, and a local community that you can engage with and be a part of and help is kind of like a little twee fantasy of like many people my age. They get really. It's only the people really who decide that they adore and want to like constantly live a cosmopolitan kind of city life that don't do that. It's just a problem that those are the people who end up in positions of authority, which again is why there should be limited power on the state. But that's that's fine. Architect of Fate says, "Mr. Britisher, could we get a progress report on how well your protege is doing? Sargon, are you finding the fence to your liking? # we are the fence."
I'm pretty radical. I don't consider myself a fence sitter.
Well, there you go. See, so the protege has just broken with his patron. He has just leapt from under his wing. What can I say?
Well,
I am shocked.
I'm not sitting on the fence. So there are a bunch of things that I think need to be done about a bunch of other things, and I think they should be done.
Well, you see, there is a general problem that people who would see anybody who has any sort of centrist inclinations as just being a fence sitter,
Right, okay.
not
That's-
willing to understand the concept that will mean that they will take positions on individual issues, as opposed to following it on along tribal lines.
Well, that just seems silly.
I just want to say I've just seen this on Twitter. Somebody has found the Antifa network and is sharing it. It's like a list of all of these.
Oh yes, it's OC Antifa leaked it originally. Like they turned out that they had like a massive 3-year.
Yeah. There's a hell of a lot of law firms on this list.
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Interesting. Very interesting. Carry on.
Yeah. British Knight says, in an ideal society, there would be a duty to rip and tear until it is done. Doom guy for Utopia police chief.
Doom Guy 2020.
Anna Quinn Cringewalker says, we basically need a real-life shadow broker from Mass Effect. Someone on the outside who blackmails leaders to act or not on the chaos. Yeah, I know, but then you end up with people like Jeffrey Epstein. That's the trouble.
Good point.
Nathan Hood says, in order to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire for a safe and secure society.
It's getting more and more attractive, isn't it?
Did Palpatine have riots?
Well, I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if they had? But of course, no, because everybody was happy because they had a higher purpose.
Apart from Alderaan, who got annihilated.
Well, I mean, they got what was coming to them.
Yeah, Rebel Planet.
Chris Moir says, Sargon, do you agree with Mr. Gormsby's social rules? Don't laugh at Greek men kissing, don't buy retail from a Jew, never trust a Chinaman, etc.
What's wrong with that?
What are those rules again?
Don't laugh at Greek men kissing. Don't buy retail from a Jew. Never trust a Chinaman, etc. Also, don't clip that, EJP. I know you're listening. There you go. DeWall says, you are wrong. In a liberal society, the monopoly of violence lies with the citizenry, not the state.
Not the exercise of the initiation of force is with the state.
Correct.
But the state has to be legitimate under certain grounds.
If the state is not legitimate, so pure John Locke, and everybody's going to go all low key and all that. Pure John Locke says, yes, the monopoly of violence is with the state, but if the state does not uphold their part of the bargain, it is incumbent on the citizens to rise up in arms and overthrow them. Which is the justification for the American Revolution, and I would say the citizens of these 40 cities that have been burned would be justified under the Lockean vision of the world to rise up and overthrow their.
They certainly think over.
But not the rioters now. I'm talking about the everybody else basically would be.
Yeah, but the rioters are doing it for the same justification. They just have a different interpretation of the world than we do.
That's true as well. But it's a bit difficult to say you're rioting against this.
They're wrong.
Hold on.
Sargon. That's what
Hold on. It's a bit difficult to say that you're rioting against the system when the system is cheering you on.
Oh, I agree. They're lying. It's all play acting revolutionary because everyone's on their side. All the good and powerful are on their fucking side, and so it's total horseshit.
So it's not true. It's not a true kind of Lockean style revolution.
No, but that's what they think they're doing. You know, that's the excuse they give. You know, that's the spirit of the excuse.
And also I should say, if you can imagine a Lockean style insurrection, they would basically rise up and attack the leaders, whereas this is just kind of completely random. You know, it's just people's businesses. You know, companies that have nothing to do with this whatsoever. People in the street getting beaten up. That's not kind of organized revolution, which would, I mean, if you, I tell you, a very good footage to look at is Castro's taking over in Havana in Cuba, which was, I mean, literally a small guerrilla unit taking out the leadership. It wasn't just random. They weren't burning everything up. It was extremely targeted, and that's what a genuine political interaction looks like. Yeah.
Are you listening, Black Lives Matter?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Just saying.
Bob reiterates, Twitter Fox 13 Tampa Bay, the people in Polk country like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns, and if you try to break into their homes to steal, to set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out. Like it's...
Can't argue with it, can you?
Paradox Engine says, so American leftist revolutionaries vandalize a statue of a Polish leftist revolutionary of past age who incidentally donated his entire inheritance to free slaves. I wonder what his crime was. Not left enough.
Being white.
And yeah,
his crime was being white.
So this is a chap called Shoots. I'm not trying to pronounce that. Yeah, KOSCIUSZKO's monument, and it's just covered in BLM propaganda and fuck the police and a big picture of a pig with its eyes crossed out. Yeah, it's insane as well. Like, I think there's like a media thing of people trying to ask the protesters around the statue whether or not they knew what he stood for, and they just have no idea. It's like, he's the guy who donated to save your lives in the past, and you pull the statue down. Ridiculous.
Fuck that guy, he's white. Beat his ass.
Yeah, or like, he must have been a slavery apologist or something. In fact, he was the opposite. Saffron says, didn't do nothing muffins. Nicholas Van Neal says, but AA, Creamy Sheev gained supreme power through a vote.
Oof.
Well, he can't be perfect.
Jaws the Great and Powerful says, press 1 if rubber is a boomer, followed by many ones. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, Old Iran was a justified strike on a terrorist stronghold by a duly elected leader fulfilling his duty to protect his people from subversive elements.
Preaching to the choir. Preaching to the choir.
And Coney currently says, Heinleinian citizen republicanism, ho, SGC.
Yep.
Trump's going to give a speech.
Trump's going to give a speach. Clinging Mars says, yeah, Trump is about to speak. So I think we'll pull things to close there. But thanks to everyone who turned up. And thank you very much to my guests who came along very kindly for this episode. Those being the Britisher, as always. Thank you for being here.
Honour and a privilege.
Thank you very much to Sargon for coming down.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you to the academic agent for obviously gracing us with his presence on the Sea Show.
You mean our future ruler?
Yeah, oh, yes. Yes.
The most merciful, most benevolent academic agent.
Ruler of all he beholds.
All I want to do is bring...
Yes.
All I want to do is bring justice to criminals.
Peace be unto him, the academic agent. And yes, and thank you very much to the chat. Everyone who donated, you very much appreciated, and everyone who just turned up to have fun in the comments. We hope it was a good stream, and until next time, take care and have a great week.
Solo was wrong.
No, the hell he was.